Just Say Yes by Cindy Kirk. Narrated by Amy McFadden. Chapter 1. There's something about his eyes. Brittany Appleton stood in the crowded waiting area of the small eatery in Denver's Golden Triangle and tried not to stare. The man who'd captured her attention sat alone at a two-top near the far wall. She judged him to be in his late 20s, about her own age. Though his broad shoulders had a confident set, he wasn't the type she normally noticed, not with all that scruffy facial hair. She much preferred the clean-shaven look. She tried to figure out what drew her to him, other than those incredible baby blues. It wasn't his wardrobe. Britt loved fashionable men, and this guy, dressed in a navy t-shirt, worn jeans, and work boots, fell short in that department. Seriously, who went out in public dressed like that on a Friday night? Still, her gaze kept slipping back to him. There was something about those eyes. Britt had nearly reached the front of the line when her own eyes, which were idly scanning the dining area, met his. She couldn't look away. For several heartbeats, time stood still. Her lips curved upward. When he smiled back, a rush of warmth flooded her. Casually, she lifted her phone and shifted her gaze. She pretended interest in several recent messages from friends in Pennsylvania. As she read about their Friday night plans, she wondered how much longer she'd have to wait to eat. The tables were full, and most of the customers were just now getting their food. The group before her, 4 girlfriends beginning their night on the town with a meal, scored the only table to open up in the last 10 minutes. "How many?" the harried hostess asked Britt when she returned after seating the foursome. Britt held up one finger. "How long?" "Hard to say." The woman, mid-30s with an unruly strand of curly brown hair that kept falling over one eye, shot her a weary smile. "I'll wait." The hostess nodded before hurrying off. "I'll seat you as soon as I can." Britt's stomach rumbled and had her considering whether she should stay. The decision was difficult because of the amount of time she'd already invested. Besides, her online search showed this place offered an eclectic menu and reasonable prices. Reviews of the specialty burgers had made her mouth water. Then again, since she'd hardly had anything to eat all day, it was likely anything remotely resembling food would have her salivating. She just hadn't expected the lengthy wait. "Ma'am?" Like a hunting dog who'd caught the scent, Britt jerked her head up. The hostess was back. Britt gave the woman her full attention. "You have a table?" The brunette hesitated, then gestured toward Mr. Blue Eyes. "The man over there has invited you to share his table. If you're interested, I can seat you now." Britt glanced at the man, who lifted a hand slightly, as if to confirm he was the guy in question. "Sure. Okay. That works." As she followed the hostess across the dining area, Britt told herself it was no different than sitting next to a stranger at a bar. If she got a weird vibe, she'd leave. But if he was a decent guy, she'd get her food faster and have someone to talk with while she ate. To her surprise, once she reached the table, he stood and pulled out her chair. Mr. Blue Eyes had manners. A check mark in the positive column. "Thanks for sharing your table." She smiled over her shoulder as he pushed in her chair. "I'm Britt Appleton." "Well, Britt, the chair was going to waste, and I've been here enough to know you were looking at a long wait." He resumed his seat, then extended a hand. "Amos Lee." Britt gave his hand a firm shake. She'd expected to find it work-hardened and calloused, but though his grip was strong, his skin was surprisingly smooth. His nails, cut short, were clean. "Well, Amos." Britt picked up the menu, even though she'd already reviewed it online and made her decision. "What's good here?" "Depends on what you're in the mood to eat." He took a sip of water, his intense gaze never leaving her face. "I ordered the Tex-Mex burger with the sweet potato fries. It's their signature burger." A waitress appeared tableside, pad in hand and one eye on the kitchen. "I'll have the same as him." Britt briefly considered adding a drink, but decided it would cost too much. "And tap water. No ice." "I'll get this in right away." The young woman scooped up the menu, glanced at Amos, and lifted a brow. "Another beer?" Amos shot Britt a glance. "Only if you'll join me. My treat." She hesitated for only a second. "Sure. Thanks." "Make that two, Mary." Amos offered the waitress a warm smile. "You know her?" Britt's gaze followed the blonde as she hurried off. Surprise flickered across his face. "No? Why do you ask?" "You called her by name." "She introduced herself when she took my order." He shrugged. "Seems like common courtesy to remember it." Mary soon returned with 2 bottles of Modelo Negra. After checking Britt's identification, she set them on the table. Britt lifted the bottle, turned it around to read the label. "I'm not much of a fan of dark beer." "To new adventures." Amos held up his bottle, and seeing where he was going with this, Britt clanked her bottle against his. "And to new friends," he added. "Thanks for the beer." She took a cautious sip and found herself relaxing as the caramely sweetness slid down her throat. "It's similar to a Vienna lager," he told her, malt-focused. "It's good." She took another sip. "I bet it goes great with Tex-Mex." One reviewer said, "It's bold enough to retain flavor against rich dishes, but doesn't overpower." "You know your beers." His lips quirked upward. "I'm one of those guys who knows a little about a lot of things." The keen intelligence in those liquid blue depths told Britt he knew quite a bit. "What is it you do, Amos?" "You mean other than eat Tex-Mex burgers, drink beer, and spend time with pretty women?" She couldn't help but smile. The man was so darn affable. Taking a long pull of beer, he didn't continue until the bottle was back on the table. "I'm good with my hands and know my way around a hammer. Have you seen Silver Creek?" Britt assumed he was referring to the building a couple of blocks away, rather than the town of the same name just west of Denver. "It's an amazing structure. Are you working on it?" "I am." He sat back in his chair and studied her. "Enough about me. Tell me about Britt." "Here you go." Mary returned with a plate in each hand and a bottle of ketchup under one arm. "That's ranch in those metal cups in case you prefer that over ketchup for your sweet potato fries." My order came out at the same time as his. Britt couldn't hide her pleasure. "That's incredible." "I put in a special word with the cook." Mary shot Amos a wink. "Anything else I can get either of you?" Amos glanced at Britt. She shook her head. "I'm good. Thanks." The second Mary turned away, Britt cut her hamburger in half. "If I'd known it was this big, we could have shared." "Not on your life." Amos laughed, a rich, robust sound. "I'm going to eat every bite of this monster." "Construction is physical. I'm sure you've worked up an appetite." Britt wrapped her lips around the burger. The taste of beef, guacamole, cheese, and salsa was an orgasmic explosion in her mouth. She set the rest of the burger down as she chewed, savored, then swallowed. "Oh my God, this is amazing!" Amos grinned, showing a mouthful of perfect white teeth. "I'm betting you'll eat the whole thing." Laughing, Britt wiped the guac from the edges of her lips with a paper napkin. "Now that I've had a taste, I'm not touching that bet." They ate in silence and were nearly finished when Amos cocked his head. "What made you decide to check out this place?" "What makes you think I haven't been here before?" As she spoke, Britt dipped a fry in the ranch dressing. "Just a guess." He smiled. "I'm a regular. Odds are our paths would have crossed before now." "You're right. I'm a first-timer." Lifting the beer bottle to her lips, she took a long drink and felt the day's worries ease away. Maybe it was the food, or the beer, or the pleasant company. Whatever the reason, she finally relaxed. Tomorrow would be soon enough to concentrate on her next step. "Do you live here?" he prompted. "In Denver?" At his nod, she shook her head. "I just got into town last night." "Here for business or pleasure?" "Business." Britt sighed the word as the simple question brought worries flooding back. At his questioning glance, she waved a hand. "Temporary setback." "Anything I can do to help?" The sympathy in his voice and the warm concern in his eyes had her wanting to spill all. What if she did? What would be the harm? She'd likely never see the guy again. She could keep names and specifics to a minimum. Britt was self-aware enough to know the tension she'd experienced today came from needing to vent, but she'd had no one available. Her sister, back in Wisconsin, was busy relocating her bookstore and planning a wedding. Her parents, well, they would simply tell her it was her fault for playing fast and loose with the truth. As far as girlfriends, the ones in Philly were social media hounds. Anything she told them would be blasted far and wide in seconds. This guy? He was safe. Well, relatively safe, if she ignored those potent blue eyes. She cocked her head. "Do you like stories?" Interest sparked in his eyes. "What kind of stories?" "Ones that have a little bit of everything." She paused and added a ghoulish tone to the words. "Suspense, intrigue, deception." "You had me at sex." Britt did a double blink. "I said suspense, not sex." The twinkle in his eyes told her he'd heard correctly the first time. "My mind must have wandered and filled in the wrong blank." She had to laugh. "Do you want to hear the story or not?" He rubbed his chin, pretended to be thinking it over, then grinned. "Absolutely. The suspense is killing me." Dishes were efficiently whisked away, and bottles of beer were replaced with mugs of strong coffee and bowls of blackberry cobbler. His treat, he assured her when he saw her hesitating. Whatever her current story was, money, or the lack of it, played a part. It had been only a couple of weeks since he'd been in Door County, Wisconsin. Though he and Britt hadn't met there, Good Hope was a small town. He'd recognized her the instant she walked into the cafe. When he caught her eyeing him, he assumed, despite his disguise, that she'd also recognized him. But once she came over and sat down, he realized the combination of long hair, an abundance of facial hair, and ultra-casual clothes had effectively concealed his real identity. It was clear she didn't suspect Amos Lee and J.R. Driscoll were the same man. For now, J.R. would keep it that way. Britt was a wild card, a very interesting wild card. He sat back, wrapped his fingers around the mug of steaming coffee, and offered an encouraging smile. "I'm currently unemployed," she began. That, he thought, explained her close watch on the dinner tab. He'd already planned to pick up the check. Now he'd make sure she didn't get her hands on any part of it. "I came to Denver to interview for a job and to right a wrong." She dipped her spoon absently into the cobbler as she spoke. "Is this the suspense part?" "In a way." Britt chuckled and brought the spoon to her lips. She had nice lips, smooth and full and red. He wondered if they'd taste like cherries. "I put someone's name down as a personal reference on my application. That perceived association likely played a part in me being granted an interview." The puzzle pieces refused to fall into place. "Are you concerned the person might not give you a good recommendation?" "See, the thing is," Britt wiped a smear of blackberry from her lips with a napkin, "I don't know this person very well. Okay, not at all. I assumed, when I sent in the application that there would be a chance for us to get acquainted." That didn't happen. I've tried reaching out numerous times, but we haven't yet connected. A personal reference who doesn't know you. That is intriguing. JR kept his tone light. Why list someone you don't know? Like I said, I thought I'd have a chance to get to know this person and convince him to vouch for me. Why not simply list someone who knows you? I wanted a name, a connection, something guaranteed to lift me out of the slush pile. I knew if I could get an interview, I could sell myself, make them see I'm perfect for the job. That took balls. He lifted the cup to his lips, studied her over the rim. Did it work? Did you get the interview? Her lips curved. I did. Congratulations. Thank you. Britt's gaze shifted out the window. More here, he thought. How did the interview go? I bet you nailed it. I discovered today that my reference is on vacation. JR was glad he'd had only 2 beers. He was having way too much difficulty following this conversation. He thought about making a joke about his confusion, but sensed this was no time for levity. That's a positive. It'll make it difficult for your prospective employer to check your reference. She nodded. The determined gleam was back in her eyes. It also gives me extra time to make contact before the interview. JR pulled his brows together. I thought you'd already had the interview. It was rescheduled. She expelled a heavy sigh. I have to wait 2 more weeks. Which gives you time to contact your reference. For a second, JR was tempted to tell her his real name and offer to contact this person himself. His connections in Denver were wide and far-reaching. As he wasn't one to give in to impulse, he hesitated. His Amos identity was a closely guarded secret. As himself, JR couldn't go out without someone wanting to talk football. Since his family owned the Colorado Grizzlies, that was understandable, but it made socializing difficult. Like now, there was no way he could be sitting here as JR having a quiet dinner and conversation with Britt. Last year, after he'd been voted Denver's most eligible bachelor, the paparazzi had become even more relentless. What is it you do? He took a bite of the cobbler, pronounced it excellent, then took another bite. Social media. Until recently, I worked with a sports team back east. They had to cut back. It was the whole last one hired, first one fired thing. I'd still be there if the reductions had been based on merit. Social media. JR stifled a groan. Good thing he'd kept silent. I had this plan. I'm big on plans. She talked with her hands, gesturing with her spoon. I was going to kill the interview today and hoped they'd make a decision quickly. As long as HR didn't get to her fake reference before she did, he thought. I didn't think I'd be out of work and in limbo for another 2 weeks. Britt gave a half-hearted chuckle, then squared her shoulders. It's not an ideal situation, but I'll make it work. JR admired her confidence. Focus and decisiveness could carry you far in any profession. Is this particular job the only position in Denver that interests you? He wished she'd be more specific, but understood her reluctance to share. She didn't know him any better than he knew her. Positions I can sink my teeth into are few and far between, and extremely competitive. Her gaze turned distant as she took a long drink of coffee. To find something else that would challenge me, I'd have to try another city. Why don't you? She met his gaze. If I have to, I will, but I don't want to give up on this one prematurely. This is my dream job, and I honestly think I stand a good chance. Sensing there was more she wanted, needed, to say, he merely inclined his head, took another sip of coffee. I also don't have a lot of money. She absently licked a blackberry off her spoon with the flick of her tongue. His mouth went dry. Her gaze turned contemplative. Another city would mean asking my parents to lend me a few bucks. That would be a disaster. You don't think they'd come through for you? They'd give me the money. Some of the light in Britt's eyes dimmed, but not before making a couple of comments that imply I'm an impetuous flake. It's how they've always viewed me. She did a good job of keeping her voice even, but because he was listening intently, JR heard the pain. Wanting to comfort her, he laid his hand over hers. His body tensed at the contact, but he pretended he felt nothing. She let his hand rest there for several heartbeats. I hope you've never had to face the pressure of having to prove yourself again and again. Trust me, it sucks. JR made a non-committal sound. His family's expectations for him and his siblings had been strong and constant for as long as he could remember. He didn't mind the expectations. What he did mind was being underestimated. The whole most eligible bachelor craziness hadn't helped. It's late. I should go. Britt abruptly stood and reached for the check. JR scooped it up a second before she could grab it. My treat. Her eyes flashed blue fire, and her chin lifted in a stubborn tilt. Tell me what I owe. Look. He kept his voice low as he rose, determined not to draw any unnecessary attention to them. I came here prepared to eat alone. I enjoyed sharing a meal and conversation with you. Please, let me pay. Her teeth caught her bottom lip. He could almost see pride waging a battle with common sense. Okay, but I'll leave the tip. She extended her hand. Deal. He closed his hand over hers. Now, since you're the planner, where do we go from here? Chapter 2. The next morning, Britt stood outside Silver Creek. The beauty of the high-rise in Denver's Golden Triangle stole her breath. Nearly complete, the 15-story building was a marvel of glass and silver glitz. In doing her research on the Driscoll family, Britt had learned this project was JR's baby. She knew coming to the work site hoping to run into him was a long shot. His personal assistant had told her that JR was away on vacation, so what were the odds he'd be here? Still, she reassured herself, long shots sometimes came in. At the time, listing JR as a reference had seemed a brilliant move. How could she sell herself if she didn't get an interview? She'd been confident she and JR would connect when they both attended the same wedding in her hometown of Good Hope. How was it even possible that in a small town where everyone was in everyone else's business, they'd managed not to speak? It had to be a Good Hope first. Then, just before the wedding, JR's grandfather had gone into the hospital, and JR had returned to Denver to be with him. The best laid plans, Britt thought with a sigh. Well, she'd gotten the interview. Now she just had to get to JR before HR did. Today's plan, should she be lucky enough to run across him, was to be polite and remind him of his acquaintance with Bea. Her twin had spoken with him several times at length when he'd been in Door County. Squaring her shoulders, Britt stepped into the building with a confidence that said she belonged. She'd learned that trick long ago. Carpenters hurried in and out of the units meant for shops. She wondered if she'd run into Amos. The thought made her smile. Though she hadn't invited him back to her hotel room with her last night, she had given him her number. Pushing thoughts of Amos aside, Britt focused on the guard who sat at a sharply angled console. Like the building where the Grizzlies' operations were centered, this one had a thoroughly modern feel, from the marble flooring to the straight lines and large windows. Several workmen crowded around the guard, distracting the young man. Britt skirted the station and slipped onto an elevator. She picked her favorite number as her destination. The second she stepped off on the 4th floor, she felt the tension ease from her shoulders. Though still exuding the shine of being new, the flooring, a silver mist laminate that looked like wood, and the walls, painted a dusty blue, gave the area a homey vibe. Or perhaps she was simply having a subliminal reaction to the message on a white chalkboard easel that proclaimed "Welcome Home" in an elegant font. Britt paused at the sight of a woman dressed in baggy trousers and an eggplant-colored cotton shirt. Dark hair, liberally peppered with gray, had come loose from a clip at the back of her neck as she struggled to move a large box. "Let me help." Britt moved quickly to the woman's side. The woman's head turned, and Britt saw she was older than she'd guessed. Late 60s for sure, possibly early 70s. Bright blue eyes behind stylish teal-infused tortoiseshell glasses held a smile. "That's nice of you to offer, but seriously, I'm happy to help. 4 hands are always better than 2. Britt glanced at the boxes. "Moving these would be easier with a dolly." "There was one. Darn if I know where it went." The woman straightened and held out her hand. Her fingernails were clean and square-cut, devoid of polish. "I'm Hal." "Brittany Appleton." She took the woman's hand and found she had a solid grip. "Call me Britt." "Well, Britt Appleton." Sharp blue eyes met hers. "I appreciate the help." With 2 strong women on the job, it didn't take much for them to slide the 4 large boxes off to one side. "What's in these, anyway?" Britt asked as she straightened. "Baskets filled with a selection of coffee and tea." Hal smiled. "Housewarming gifts for each apartment." "That's nice of management to hire you to do this." Britt studied the box, then lifted her gaze to study the endless doors on both sides. "Are 4 boxes enough? Seems like it wouldn't even cover this floor." "More are on their way." Hal cocked her head. "Can I help you find what you're looking for?" "Is it that obvious I'm out of my element?" Something about Hal's easy smile, or maybe it was the twinkle in her eye, reminded Britt of Amos. "This is my first time in Denver." While the response didn't answer Hal's question, it bought Britt some time. She could ask Hal if she knew JR, but if he wasn't here, did she really want to announce she was hanging around the building hoping to run into him? Still, she couldn't simply wander aimlessly. The question was on the tip of her tongue when her stomach emitted a loud growl. Though Britt rarely blushed, heat stole up her neck. How could she be hungry after last night's meal? "There's food for the crew set up on 3. The woman took Britt's arm. "Let's get you some. Then you can fill me in on what brought you to Silver Creek." As they stepped past the welcome home sign, Britt trailed her fingers across the top. "This is a nice touch." The woman smiled. "I think so." Britt turned toward the elevator bank, but the woman kept walking until they reached a door leading to the stairs. The women made the 1-flight track down, side by side. The sides of the stairwell were decorated with 3D wall art in vibrant colors. Britt resisted the urge to touch. "The place where I lived in Philly was nice, but had more of an industrial feel." "You're from Philadelphia?" Reaching the door to the 3rd floor, Hal pulled it open. "That's where I've lived for the past 2 years." Britt found herself chatting easily with Hal. The woman's encouraging look had her confiding. "I'm originally from Good Hope, Wisconsin." "I know where that is." A smile blossomed on Hal's face. "That's on the Door County Peninsula." Britt widened her eyes. "You've been there?" "No, but a family member visited there recently." Hal's tone turned wistful. "When he spoke of it, the place sounded so much like Silver Creek. It made me a bit homesick." Britt's brows pulled together in confusion. "It reminded you of this building?" The woman laughed. "Not the building. My hometown. Silver Creek, Colorado." Britt wondered if the fact that this building carried the same name as a town she so obviously loved had drawn Hal to work here. Or perhaps she'd known the Driscoll family when they'd lived in Silver Creek. Before she could ask, they stepped out onto a floor buzzing with workers, both men and women. Britt did a quick sweep for Amos, but came up empty. While construction had been completed on 4, this floor was still a work in progress. A tall man with dark hair and a clipboard stepped away from the group he'd been speaking with and strolled to them. "Anything I can do for you?" It was obvious by the other 3 men, also wearing dress pants and shirts with ties, they were conferring on something related to the building. Since he had clearly been occupied, Britt was surprised he was taking a moment to greet the older woman at her side. "My friend and I," Hal gestured with a nod toward Britt, "are about to enjoy the buffet. If there's anything you need, I know who to ask." Hal gave the man's arm a squeeze. Is everyone in Denver this nice? Britt knew the neighbors helping neighbors thing was part of Good Hope life, but she was surprised to find the same spirit in a big city. "Derek is the general superintendent. He's in regular communications with both the project manager and Kyle Kendrick." Hal glanced at Britt, and she saw the question in the woman's eyes. "I've met Kyle, but he arrived in Good Hope after I'd moved away. My sister knows him better. She loves it there." Hal's gaze searched her face. "But not you?" "It's a wonderful community. Great people." Britt hesitated. "This may sound strange, but Good Hope isn't home to me. Not like it is to be. I guess you could say I'm still searching for home." Hal placed a hand on her arm. "I understand." "You do?" Britt's voice rose in surprise. The older woman nodded. "And I have the utmost confidence that one day you'll end up just where you're meant to be." After ushering Britt down the hall, Hal whipped open a door with a flourish and extended an arm. "Voila!" Britt's mouth dropped open, and her stomach gave an appreciative growl. She'd expected only donuts and coffee. In addition, there were platters of fruit and veggies, as well as cups of yogurt, not to mention a display of mouth-watering pastries. Hal's eyes twinkled. "Quite the spread, wouldn't you say?" Britt hesitated. "Are you sure it's okay if I have some? I mean, I don't work here, and you're my guest. Trust me, it's perfectly okay." Hal nodded to several workers who greeted her as she and Britt crossed to the food. Once their plates were filled and they were seated at a table, the woman's warm gaze settled on Britt. "Now, tell me what brought you to Denver." Britt noticed that no one was looking at them as if they didn't belong there. She dipped her spoon into the yogurt. "There's a position open as a social media specialist with the Grizzlies. Are you familiar with the team?" "I'm a huge fan. Never miss a game." Hal daintily broke her donut, topped with sprinkles, into bite-sized pieces. "It seems like a really well-run organization." Hal inclined her head. The woman had a way, Britt decided, of looking at you as if you were the only person in the room, as if what you had to say really mattered, a quality that invited confidences. Perhaps that was why Britt found herself sharing so much. "I was supposed to interview yesterday." Britt swallowed a spoonful of yogurt and kept her tone matter-of-fact. "I flew in on Thursday so I could be ready. But Nyla Driscoll, she's president of operations, unexpectedly extended her stay in Paris. Stephanie, the director, wanted her there, and Nyla wasn't interested in a Zoom interview. Long story short, at the last minute, the interview was rescheduled for 2 weeks from now." Hal's brows drew together. "That doesn't seem fair." "It isn't, but I really want the job. So, I'll wait." Britt lifted her hands, then let them drop. "I just have to find a cheap place to live until the interview, then hope they decide fairly quickly on who they want to hire. Once I get the offer, I can start immediately." "Is that why you're here? To see if there are apartments available?" Hal took another bite of donut. "This building is beautiful, and I'd love to live here, but it's outside my budget. Way outside." Britt laughed. "I rented a room in a house not far from here through Airbnb. I have to share a bathroom, but it's a fabulous deal at only $50 a night. The problem is I could only book it through tonight. It won't be easy finding another place that inexpensive." Hal cocked her head. "Any leads?" "Not yet." Britt scooped up some more yogurt and shrugged. "I'm resourceful. I'll figure it out." I have no doubt you will. Sometimes it feels as if my entire life has been spent making things happen, fighting against the odds and the biases of others. Britt spoke with confidence. Though the resistance to women working in the sports industry makes no sense to me. I've always had to work extra hard to prove myself. Hal sipped her tea and studied Britt over the rim of her cup. It's easy to be dismissed when you're young and beautiful. Actually, I believe any female faces extra challenges in the workplace, sports-focused or otherwise. You're either too attractive or not attractive enough, as if how you look has anything whatsoever to do with how good you are at your job. Britt puffed out her cheeks. It's so frustrating that attractive men are seen as successful, but it's assumed that an attractive woman got where she is because of her looks. Caring about fashion and skincare somehow means you don't care about anything else. I agree. Women face discrimination, both subtle and overt, in the business world. And you're right, sadly, that women don't get the same acceptance that men do, regardless of their appearance. Hal's eyes narrowed behind glasses that managed to look incredibly stylish despite their simplicity. It can still be a good old boys' club in many circles. Not to mention, we women can often be our own worst enemies. Britt chuckled. Sing it, sister. I've been where you are now, only during a time even more biased against women. Hal's expression turned fierce. I have granddaughters, one who is knee-deep in a man's world, and another who will eventually be there. I see how their ideas are often dismissed without due consideration, and it makes me angry. Stuff like that makes me even more determined to succeed. I like you, Britt. You're a savvy young woman who doesn't accept stupid behavior. Hal rose to her feet with an ease not often seen in someone her age. I'd love to show you one of the micro units in the building. I guarantee you won't find a nicer place for the cost. Though Britt knew even one of the tiny units would be out of her price range, curiosity had her nodding. I'd love to see one. Britt soon found herself striding with Hal toward the stairway. Hal slanted a sideways glance. I just realized you never technically answered why you're here. I'm in Denver for the job interview. No. Hal gestured with a sweeping arm. Why did you come here, to Silver Creek? Oh. Britt brushed back a strand of hair. I was looking for J.R. Driscoll. Do you know him? Have you seen him around this morning? Everyone knows J.R. The woman spoke easily, but her eyes turned sharp and assessing. He's frequently on site, though I haven't seen him this morning. Perhaps Sean can tell us his location. No, please don't. Hal was already motioning to a man who crossed to greet them. Mrs. Stop right there, mister. How many times do I have to remind you to call me Hal? The older woman's tone might be teasing, but the hint of underlying steel took Britt by surprise. Then she realized it shouldn't. Hal had a strong personality. It didn't matter if this guy was running the world. She commanded. No, demanded. Respect. Sorry. Sean cast a curious glance at Britt, and she could see him trying to figure out where she fit in. Brittany Appleton, I'd like to introduce you to Sean McCormick. Sean is the architect responsible for this amazing building. One of the architects, Sean clarified. I've got an amazing team. You do, Hal agreed. It's a pleasure to meet you, Miss Appleton. Sean's smile was warm and appreciative as he transferred the clipboard to shake Britt's hand. How do you and Mrs. He stopped himself just in time. How do you and Hal know each other? Before Britt could answer, Hal stepped back into the conversation. She's looking for J.R. Have you seen him this morning? I haven't. Sean's phone pinged. He offered a regretful smile. We're finalizing last-minute changes to the rooftop and very important work. Hal smiled. You go on. We're headed to 6. We won't keep you any longer. Have a good day, ma'am. Sean nodded to Britt, then hurried down the corridor. If I see JR, I'll mention you're looking for him. Thank you. Hal turned back to find Britt staring. You know so many people. While sitting in the break room, she'd noticed the number of people who'd smiled and called out a greeting to Hal. Heck, even the lead architect knew her by name. Hal was definitely well connected. Britt wondered if Hal did work for other Driscoll properties or businesses, or maybe her gift baskets were famous in Denver. She'd have to get a look at one of them, maybe hook up with Hal for a Grizzlies promotion. If she got the job. I'm here every day, Hal told her. I like people, and make it a point to get to know them, not just what their job is here, but who they are. My sister Bea is like that, Britt told her. She's not super social, but she listens, and people like her. What about you? Hal asked as they continued down the hall. I'm social, and I like to talk, Britt shrugged. I don't listen as much as I should. I'm working on that. Hal stopped in front of the door to the stairwell and glanced down at Britt's heels. I usually take the steps whenever possible. If you prefer the elevator, that's okay with me. I also prefer the steps. Impulsively, Britt looped her arm through Hal's. I need to work off last night's burger. I had dinner at Blue Dandelion. It's an amazing bistro just off Tremont. Hal chuckled. I adore their burgers. They are magnificent. Britt grinned. She hadn't known her own grandparents. Her father's parents had died in a car accident when her dad had been in college. Her mother's family lived across the country and rarely made the trip to Wisconsin. It would have been nice having a grandmother like Hal. You didn't say why you're looking for JR. Hal's tone was both curious and conversational. I made a mistake. Britt kept her voice casual as they climbed the stairs. I'm trying to rectify it before it sinks my chances at getting the Grizzlies job. They reached the 6th floor in short order. This sounds intriguing. Hal arched a brow. What did you do? Britt held the door open for Hal. Have you ever done something that seemed like a good idea at the time, but then you looked back and wondered what you were thinking? Hal burst into laughter. That's never happened to me. Yes, Britt decided, seeing the twinkle in the woman's eyes. She'd enjoy having a grandmother like Hal. I've learned the most difficult part of landing a job is getting in the front door. Britt hated to confess this part, but the woman's eyes, so warm and judgment-free, told her Hal would understand. I knew I could sell my skills in an interview, but first I had to get my application out of the slush pile. Slush pile? Britt stood in the lobby of the 6th floor with Hal. The hundreds of applications a prospective employer receives. Sure, many are from people not qualified, but there are tons of qualified individuals out there, many who pad their credentials and who look better on paper than they are in reality. Hal offered an encouraging smile. I get it. You needed to do something to pull you out of the slush. Exactly. JR somehow figures into this? Hal prompted. Yes. Britt expelled a breath. She'd gone this far down the track, she might as well pull the train into the station. He was in the Good Hope area recently. Celebrity golf tournament in Milwaukee. The older woman, Britt was beginning to realize, knew a whole lot about a variety of topics. Yes, JR was in Milwaukee, then came to Good Hope to meet with Kyle Kendrick. Kendrick, Inc. is the general contractor for Silver Creek. Britt nodded, again not surprised. You're saying JR came to Good Hope to meet Kyle, and that's where you two connected? Rather than taking Britt immediately to one of the units, Hal sank into a chair in the lobby. We never connected. Britt dropped into the adjacent chair. I heard about the social media position, and when I realized JR was in town, I made it my goal to meet him. One of my high school friends was getting married, and I heard JR planned to attend the wedding. If Hal noticed, and how could she not, that Britt was taking a circuitous route to the answer, she didn't comment. You met him at the wedding? I didn't. Britt shook her head. His grandfather was hospitalized, and JR flew home. I saw a couple of news reports initially about how his grandfather was doing, but I haven't seen anything lately. I hope he's doing well. Johnny is a hearty soul. Hal's lips curved. He'll outlive us all. Johnny, that's right. JR's grandfather went by the name Johnny. A couple of articles had indicated that's what everyone called him. I'm glad to hear it. How does JR figure into your interview? Hal gently pressed for details. Yes, right. Back to that. Britt shifted in her seat. I put his name on my application as a personal reference. Confusion blanketed Hal's face. I thought you didn't know him. See the problem? Britt chuckled. I knew the name of a Driscoll on my application would pull me out of the slush. It worked. Perhaps it was your credentials that got you the interview. Maybe. I hope so. Britt started to chew on her lower lip, then stopped the bad habit. She squared her shoulders. I sent in the online application while still in good hope. I was so certain JR and I would connect at the wedding. But you didn't. I've left numerous messages with his PA. Britt expelled a breath. I heard he's on vacation, but What do you plan to say when you meet him? I thought I'd start by apologizing for listing his name when we'd never met. Hal studied her for a long moment. I'm betting you'll also seize the opportunity to reiterate how much you want the job and emphasize how amazing you'd be at it. Not only that, but perhaps you'll ask him to put in a good word for you when HR calls. The woman's gaze was so knowing that Britt had to laugh. Busted. You're a smart, determined woman. Hal nodded approvingly. I believe life is better when we females give each other a hand up. Britt offered a tentative smile. I may have the solution to several of your problems. Hal smiled. All you have to do is just say yes. Chapter 3. I'm all about solutions. Britt leaned forward. What are you proposing? First, I have a confession. Hal met Britt's eyes with a steady look. You've trusted me with details of your life and the journey that brought you here. I consider myself to be an honest and forthright person, so I'll return the confidence. A stirring of unease crept up Britt's spine. Okay. I'm Halcyon Driscoll, JR's grandmother. Everything in Britt froze. She knew her heart was still beating because she hadn't keeled over. Not yet, anyway. In seconds, anger burned the shock to ash. Her voice held a tight edge of control. You let me babble on. Knowing it was your grandson, I'd... What? Britt thought as she trailed off. Used, manipulated. Maybe she should simply let Hal pick the word. The ludicrousness of it all had Britt snorting out a laugh. I'm surprised you didn't slap me upside the head when you learned what I did to your grandson. You didn't do anything to JR. Hal's tone remained mild. You merely went after what you want. The ends justify the means? Britt shook her head. You don't believe that. She might have just met Hal, but she knew better. Everything about Hal told Britt the older woman had integrity. While she'd crossed a thin line by not identifying herself earlier, she was not an opportunist. You went after what you want, Hal repeated. Putting down JR's name on your application was a calculated risk. If he'd stayed in good hope, you'd have met him at the wedding, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. Calculated risk. Britt slowly nodded. Yes, that's how she saw it. But would JR view it through that lens? Your grandson might not agree. That's a discussion you need to have with JR. However, if you'd like me to put in a good word, please don't. Britt placed a hand on Hal's arm. I'll take care of it. Of that I have no doubt. Hal rose. Let me show you around. Britt stood and fell into step beside Hal. As they strode down the hallway, a warmth, much like a favorite sweater, settled around her shoulders. This floor has an incredibly chill vibe. Hal arched a questioning brow. Calm, serene, an oasis in the middle of chaos. Britt smiled at the fanciful sentiment. Fanciful was more her sister's style than hers. Hal's lips curved. I don't believe there is anything you could have said that would have pleased me more. Doesn't everyone feel that way? Not everyone. Hal's lips tightened, then relaxed. Silver Creek is the culmination of my vision. While I love all Denver has to offer, I've missed the connections I had in my hometown. Hal slanted a sideways glance. Silver Creek is a small mining community, about an hour west off I-70. Johnny and I maintain a house there. Right now, my grandson Miles keeps the home fires burning. Talking about the community appeared to strike an emotional chord, and Hal's voice turned thick. I love it there. Then why live in Denver? Though Britt was no fan of small-town life, she understood it held appeal for some. Denver has exceptional health care, and both Johnny and I are getting older. But the main reason is most of our family now lives here. Hal stopped at the far end of the hall. This is the communal area. The large open area reminded Britt of something straight out of an architect's playbook. Gorgeous! The focal point of the area was a sleek, two-sided gas fireplace that divided the space in half. On one side were large sectionals in dove gray, the neutral color brightened by throw pillows in lime green and royal blue. Large, vivid blue ottomans that could easily seat 4 provided additional seating. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. The other side of the room held tables, chairs, and a pool table with balls racked and ready. It's important to me that Silver Creek feel like home to those who live here. That's why there are so many places set aside for gathering and forging connections. You've thought of everything. I did my best. Satisfaction rang in Hal's voice. She looked every bit the proud mama. There's a large event room on 3 for parties and special get-togethers. That floor also has a space designated for workstation rentals. Those who move into Silver Creek will definitely be getting more than just a place to sleep. Britt let her gaze linger on one of several abstract pieces of canvas wall art, this one a striking forest scene of blue trees. You won't have any trouble leasing the units. You have to see the inside of one to fully appreciate. Hal turned and began to walk. Britt followed her to the door of a unit nearest the common area. Don't blink or you'll miss it. Hal chuckled at her own joke and pulled out a keycard. When we began discussing building Silver Creek, I told Johnny I wanted those starting out to be able to afford their own place and not have to share. Britt knew anyone able to rent a micro-unit in this building would need to be a little further up the food chain than starting out. Still, she understood and appreciated the sentiment. I had roommates when I first moved to Philly. Britt made a face, then let out a small laugh. It wasn't all bad, and sometimes it was nice to have people to come home to. But once I was earning enough money, I went solo. Hal's gaze turned curious and assessing. Did you enjoy living alone? I loved it. My roommates were on the messy side. Britt shook her head, the smile lingering on her lips. I got tired of loading their dirty plates and cups into the dishwasher and picking up their clothes. Did you leave someone special behind in Philly? Relationships take time. Britt spoke to Hal's back and followed her inside the unit. I was too busy working. Hal had been right. If she blinked, she might miss it. Are they all the same size? Micro units vary between 260 and 360 square feet. Hal stepped aside to give Britt a better view. This one is 260. Britt's admiring gaze shifted from the shiny hardwood floor to the built-in cabinets along one wall. Farther down the wall were a sink, dishwasher, stovetop, and small refrigerator. A sleek modern sofa in slate gray with chrome accents sat against the opposite wall. An industrial-style table and 2 armless chairs took up space at the far end. We furnished this and several other units to give prospective tenants ideas on how to make the space work for them. Some may want a pull-out sofa bed, others a futon, others— Hal lifted her hands. It's up to them. As they walked the length of the unit, Hal pointed out several not-so-obvious features, including tucked-away spaces for storage. Britt offered Hal an approving smile. You've done well. Thank you. Hal beamed. Now, we need to get the word out. Selling the benefits of living here is where you come in. For a split second, it sounded to Britt as if Hal was offering her a job. Then she realized what Hal was really asking, and Britt was happy to oblige. If anyone asks, you can be assured I'll sing the praises of Silver Creek and send them your way. I'd appreciate it. Hal took a seat on the sofa and patted the space beside her. Britt sank down and found the sofa to be comfortable as well as stylish. Hal glanced at her. I'd like to tap into your social media expertise. I'm happy to do what I can, Britt assured her, though I'm certain the PR company you've hired is top-notch. Hal waved a dismissive hand. I'm not talking traditional PR. I want you to hype Silver Creek. You know, talk it up on the sites young people like you visit, emphasizing this can be their home. Chat up activities in the building we'll be offering. That sounds nice, Britt spoke slowly. As long as the group activities are hyped carefully. Some may not want to participate. Introverts may simply want to come home and be alone. They need to know that's okay. Hal gave a decisive nod. Bringing up these points tells me you're the right choice for the position as my temporary assistant. Britt's heart gave a leap. Hal's offer would give her exactly what she needed right now, money to live on and a place to stay. Still, she wouldn't take advantage. I'm still hoping the Grizzlies job will come through. I hope it does. You said you can't even interview for 2 weeks. It may be even longer before you're hired and get that first paycheck. While you wait, you'll need a place to live and money for food and other necessities. Work for me during this interim period. Hal gestured with one hand. You'll have an amazing space to live, rent-free, while drawing a salary. Britt glanced around the unit. This would be the nicest place she'd lived in since leaving home for college. Rent-free and a salary? Hal's eyes glittered as if she sensed Britt was weakening. I'll also give you carte blanche on your Silver Creek social media outreach. There will be errands and other tasks, but they'll be fun. Unbelievable. Britt blinked and said the words circling in her head. Why? I believe in paying it forward. Hal leaned toward her and patted Britt's hand. Never underestimate the power of women supporting each other. The floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse afforded a magnificent view of the mountains. J.R. stood beside his grandmother and gestured with his glass of wine. It's a fabulous view. I never tire of it. His grandmother looked elegant in ivory pants topped by a pink sweater and a scarf that picked up both colors. She'd done something different with her hair, sweeping it up in some kind of twist. I look out and pretend I see the lights of home. J.R. knew she was referring to the town where she and Pops had grown up and raised their 4 boys. You still miss it. Mostly the people, she admitted with a wistful smile. But I love the convenience of life in a busy city. There's 24-hour whatever I need, just a phone call or a walk away. His grandfather strolled up. A quick kiss brushed across his wife's cheek earned him a smile. What John Driscoll lacked in height, he made up for in sheer grit. JR had inherited that grit, along with the older man's piercing blue eyes and square jaw. Johnny, as he was known to friends and family, had an easy smile at odds with his backbone of steel. Affable and social, yet supremely canny, he was a master of the deal and a loyal friend. But if you crossed him, he never forgot. That seemed to be a trait he'd gotten from his own grandfather, dating back to a scandal between the Driscolls and the Flocks, a family who owned a rival company today. The scandal had become part of Denver lore. Newspapers still dredged up the drama whenever a Driscoll and a Flock happened to attend the same event. JR made a sweep with his hand. "What do you think of the place since Antoine got done with it?" "It turned out better than I expected. I was picturing something out of Architectural Digest, with nowhere for me to put up my feet and relax." Johnny grinned when Hal elbowed him. "I assured you I'd never let that happen," she told him. "I knew you wouldn't." Johnny winked. "I wasn't so sure about Antoine." "Johnny!" Hal might have cast her husband a warning glance, but JR saw the teasing glint in her eyes. "I admit, I was as skeptical as Pops." JR shrugged. "I never imagined it would look like a comfortable home when it was done, especially with Antoine involved. You two need to lay off my designer." This time, Hal's tone held a steely edge. "Antoine is a joy and a consummate professional. He listened and gave me exactly what I wanted. What Johnny and I both wanted." The space could have easily ended up cold white with black leather and chrome, especially since Hal had chosen an interior design firm known for its stark and modern aesthetic. Instead, the place had much the same feel as the home they'd left behind in Silver Creek. When Hal announced she'd be working with Antoine, JR had been shocked. Granted, Antoine had a stellar reputation, but Hal was all about female empowerment. He'd assumed, as had many family members, she'd pick a woman. But Antoine and his grandmother had clicked. Dinner conversation flowed easily over roast chicken, scalloped potatoes, and glazed carrots. JR considered bringing up his chance encounter with Britt at the Blue Dandelion, perhaps adding how he'd been so enchanted that he'd asked for her phone number. His grandparents would be pleased. They'd been happily married for nearly 50 years and wanted their grandchildren to find that same happiness. They would not be pleased he'd introduced himself as Amos Lee. Neither of them was a fan of the subterfuge that went hand in hand with his alter ego. Which was why he shouldn't call her. As Amos, he never got more than superficially involved with anyone. Deception was a poor way to start a relationship. It was one thing to share a meal and conversation, quite another to lead a person to believe he was someone other than J.R. Driscoll. The meal with his grandparents passed quickly, with the discussion ranging from the team's chances of making the playoffs next year to his grandmother's excitement over the opening of Silver Creek. "I spoke with a property manager today and got some figures," JR announced as they retired to the great room with glasses of Austrian schnapps. "Though we're slightly behind projections on filling the units, we have a good number set to move in on the 15th. "I'll be doing my part to help fill the units." Hal shot a glance at her husband. "I hired someone today, just temporary for now. She's a lovely young woman. We got to talking when she helped me move some boxes and really hit it off. In addition to being my personal assistant, she'll do social media outreach for Silver Creek." Johnny frowned. "Who is this person?" Beneath his grandfather's gruffness, JR heard genuine concern. Hal sipped her drink. "Her name is Britt Appleton." JR couldn't stop his sharp intake of breath. "She grew up in Good Hope." Hal shifted her gaze to him. Johnny's gaze swung to JR. "You know this woman?" "I know her twin better." It wasn't a lie, JR told himself. though after last night, the time he'd spent with both women was now relatively equal.
Bee still lives there. I don't care about her twin. How well do you know the one your grandmother hired?
Johnny's voice remained calm, even as his eyes narrowed.
Not well?
The events of last night, coupled with Britt's chance encounter with his grandmother today, had JR wondering. He didn't get played often, but it happened. Though if her appearance at the eatery had been an act, she'd given an Oscar-winning performance. Johnny refocused on his wife.
Is she giving you references?
Despite Pop's efforts to be tactful, his grandmother bristled. The June Parker episode had affected them all. For Hal, discovering she'd been deceived by a woman she'd trusted implicitly had been devastating. "Britt reminds me a lot of myself at her age," was all Hal said before taking another sip of her drink. Johnny's gaze, steely-eyed when JR had been on the hot seat, softened when it settled on his wife.
Then she must be amazing. Tell me what you learned about her while you were moving boxes.
For starters, she came to Silver Creek looking for JR. His grandfather's gaze pinned JR.
You said you barely know her.
Hal's hand on her husband's arm had him refocusing. I'm the one with the answers, not him. Johnny's smile didn't fool JR. The man remained on high alert and would dig until he was satisfied. Britt told me she put JR down as a personal reference on a job application with the Grizzlies. She thought she'd get a chance to meet him when he was in Good Hope, but when you went into the hospital, JR came back early. She wants to apologize to him for listing him as a reference without having met him.
She wants to cover her ass,
Johnny muttered. His comment drew a sharp look from his wife before she lifted her glass. This is delicious. I believe I'd like a little more. JR waved his grandfather down when he started to rise.
I'll get it for you, Gran. You don't appear surprised.
Johnny's voice sounded behind him as JR crossed the room to the tray of liqueurs. JR took his time pouring the clear liquid into his grandmother's glass, recalling Britt's explanation.
I can see how such a mix-up might occur. I don't like it.
Johnny's lips pressed together as JR handed the glass to his grandmother.
First, the woman fabricates a relationship with you that doesn't exist. Then she conveniently runs into Hal and gets a job.
Instead of sitting, JR moved to the window to stare into the darkness. His grandmother wasn't the only one Britt had wowed. Her showing up here could be simply her attempt to track him down, or Britt could be playing them both.
We should at least run a background check.
Johnny gestured with his glass.
It's essential to know who you have working for you.
Once again, Johnny stopped short of mentioning June. Even after all these months, it still rankled that none of them had seen the young woman's devious nature until it had been too late. When his grandfather looked at him for support, JR nodded.
Always best to cover all the bases.
Then why, JR wondered, did he feel as if he was betraying Britt and what they'd shared last night by agreeing? Britt Appleton is not the enemy. I won't have you investigating her like she's a common criminal. Hal pushed to her feet. One bad apple won't make me lose faith. I like Britt. I admire her ambition and the fact she's a self-made woman. His grandmother crossed the room to stand in front of JR. I love you and my other grandkids, but none of you have ever had to go it alone. Hal's gaze turned fierce. I'm not asking you to help Britt, JR. Just don't get in her way. Chapter 4. Britt's first week working for Hal sped by. Though Hal kept her busy during the days, Britt's evenings were her own. Until the interview, she was making good use of the time by immersing herself in all things Grizzlies. Glancing down, Britt gave a satisfied nod at the jeans and the stylish Grizzlies shirt she'd chosen for her Friday night outing. The heeled boots, in hot pink, gave her more height and added a festive touch. Though this wasn't her normal attire, the shirt guaranteed amazing selfies. Her evening's agenda involved scoping out 3 bars her research said were favored by Grizzlies fans and players. There were others as well, but these 3 had the advantage of being within walking distance of Silver Creek. The first bar, Dandalar, had an upscale vibe. Televisions covered the walls, tuned to a variety of sporting events. Though a Colorado Rockies baseball game played on various screens, none of the customers gave them more than a cursory glance. She wondered how the place had made the list of popular sports bars. After grabbing a selfie in front of an autographed Grizzlies poster, she headed to the next establishment on her list. Slingshot had live music, which would make conversation a challenge. The place was also packed. Britt got the last open stool at the bar. Unlike Dandalar, all eyes here were on the Rockies game. No one, absolutely no one, wanted to discuss Grizzlies football. Britt spent most of her short time here chatting up the bartender. Before leaving, she asked another customer to take a picture of her and the bartender making the Grizzlies' claw gesture. "Third time's the charm," she murmured, strolling down the sidewalk to her final stop of the night, this one a country sports bar. Britt felt the stirrings of excitement as she stepped into the sights and sounds of Uncle Joe's. This place had more class than Slingshot, and the fun vibe absent from Dandalar was definitely in play here. Laughter and conversation filled the air, and the music had an infectious beat. There were tables and booths and seats at the bar. Most were filled, but she managed to snag a small table by the window when a couple left. The server brought a basket of bar mix. "What can I get ya?" "Whatever you have on tap." She planned to ask a few questions, maybe start a conversation, but a guy at another table called out for another round. Britt let her gaze drift around the room, taking in the shiny bar. The huge beveled mirror behind it made the bar look twice as large. She liked the peanut shells on the floor. Heck, she even liked how the exterior doors swung open like in Old West saloons. As she admired the doors, they opened. A single man, tall and lean, stepped inside. Britt's heart skipped a beat. Amos Lee, the man who'd asked for her number, but who hadn't bothered to call. Despite worn jeans, a faded Henley, and work-scarred boots, he looked sexy as ever. A Colorado Rockies ball cap was perched on his head. She watched his searching gaze scan the room and wondered who he was meeting. A group of men at a table on the other side of the room caught sight of him and waved him over. He'd taken only a few steps in their direction when her eyes connected with his. It was the cafe all over again, except this time the seat was at her table. She pointed to him, then to the seat opposite her at the small table, and mouthed, "Join me?" Immediately changing course, he sauntered over and slid into the seat opposite her. "This is a nice surprise." "What are the odds?" She smiled. "How are you, Amos?" "Good. And you?" "Excellent." She glanced at the table of men and saw they'd gone back to watching the game. "I hope I'm not keeping you from your friends." He waved a dismissive hand. "I'd much rather be with you." The server, Logan, set down her beer and shifted his gaze to Amos. "What can I get you?" "Same as her." Amos waited until Logan had left. "I've been thinking about you. Did you find a place to stay?" "I did." Britt hesitated over how much to divulge. "Still waiting for my interview." "That'll be here before you know it." He relaxed back in his chair. "Did you ever reach your reference?" "No." Britt scowled down into her beer. "I think he's avoiding my calls." "That surprises me." Britt looked up and inclined her head. "I can't imagine any guy avoiding you." He lifted the glass of beer that Logan dropped off. "To new friends." She clinked her glass against his and took a long swallow. "What brings you out this evening?" He glanced at the grizzly bear on her shirt and grinned.
Wearing that, I don't think it's to watch the Rockies play. What was it about this guy that made it so easy to confide in him? I'm checking out Grizzly's bars in the area. He studied her, appearing genuinely perplexed. Why? Britt considered. The interview was set. Was there really a need for absolute secrecy? The job I'm interviewing for is with the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies? Amos gave a slow nod. That makes sense. It does? You mentioned you've done social media for a sports team before. It figures you'd want to stay in the same field. He cocked his head. But why do all this research now, before you know you have the job? If I do some of the legwork now, I can hit the ground running when I finally get the offer. You do realize. He leaned across the table, his voice a low rumble. Confidence is very sexy. She laughed. Is that really the best you can do? When he opened his mouth to respond, she waved him silent. I'm just teasing. Though it is an odd kind of come on. Is that what you think I was doing? Coming on to you? Yes. She flashed a smile, gestured with one hand toward the growling grizzly on her shirt. Who can blame you? Dressed like this, I'm irresistible. Tell me where you and your Grizzly's tea have been this evening. Amos lifted the glass to his lips. I started with Dandalar. She grimaced. What a snooze fest. It may be different on Grizzly's game day. Maybe, she conceded, though I can't see that crowd getting raucous and rowdy. Agreed. He took another long sip of beer. Anywhere else? Slingshot. Everyone was too busy watching the Rockies, so I spent my time there chatting up the bartender. Discover anything interesting? It was more what he didn't say. Britt frowned. He talked a lot about how crowded it is on game days, how difficult it is for the servers to get around the patrons. The one thing he didn't mention seems telling. Amos cocked his head. Not once did he mention it was fun. Britt pulled her brows together as she sipped her beer. According to my research, these three are supposed to be the most popular Grizzlies bars in this area. I'm going to need to cast a wider net. She sensed his gaze on her as she gave this particular bar another once-over. 2 pool tables, both in use, dartboard, also in use, loads of screens lining the walls, all tuned to sporting events. Excitement sparked in her when the bar erupted into a roar. The men who gestured to Amos exchanged high fives at the Rockies' home run with bases loaded. Britt stopped Logan as he walked by. Are the crowds always this vocal? You should hear them when the Grizzlies play. Logan grinned. It's awesome. Ding, 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 Britt murmured when the server hurried off. She smiled at the huge grizzly standing on 2 legs in one corner of the bar. It's test time, my friend. She pointed to Amos. Know how you can tell that's a grizzly and not a brown bear? It happens I do know. Amos sat back in his chair. But I'd like to hear it from you. A grizzly's fur is usually lighter at the tips, giving it a grizzled appearance. It's also more aggressive. Britt curved her fingers into the claw gesture and made a quick swipe. That's why it's perfect for a football team. Logan returned with 2 more glasses of beer. His eyes lingered on her jersey. Number 78. Excellent choice. I'm a Kevin Daniels fangirl, she told Logan. You're in luck. He's right over there. The server kept his tone low, as if for Britt's ears only. Britt took a long sip of beer and narrowed her gaze on a group of men at a corner table, not far from the grizzly. How had she missed seeing Kevin? Granted, his back was partially to her, but she'd studied his picture, and that of other Grizzlies players, most of the week. Setting the bottle down, she reached out for Logan as he turned to walk away. Do you have a Sharpie? Not on me, but I can get you one. I've got a big tip for you if you can get it for me right away. Consider it done. Ignoring customers who tried to get his attention, Logan made a beeline for the bar. Amos's gaze turned assessing. What do you have planned? Watch and see. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded bill. Logan returned. When he pressed the Sharpie into her hand, she pressed the money into his palm. You're a lifesaver. I get off at 10, he told her, deliberately not glancing in Amos's direction. She gestured toward Amos. I'm with him tonight. Oh. His face fell. If you need anything. She smiled. I know who to ask. Britt felt Amos's eyes on her as she pulled out a tube of lipstick and a mirror and carefully added more red to her lips. Back in a flash. After fluffing her hair with her fingers, she shot him a wink, then sauntered across the room. She slowed her steps in order to arrive tableside just when there was a lull in conversation. As she stepped close, she saw the guys with him were all Grizzlies players. The night, she thought, just keeps getting better. Hi, guys. She flashed her brightest smile. Sorry to interrupt. I'm Britt, and I'm a huge fan of the team. I like the pink boots, Harold Cochran, a previous Defensive Rookie of the Year, drawled. She's wearing your number, Daniels. Maurice Lindsay, who'd made the Pro Bowl roster 3 years in a row, gave Kevin a poke. I'm fans of all you guys. In quick order, she went through their names and their accomplishments. Though, I have to admit, Kevin is a favorite, not only because of what he can do on the field, but because of his charitable work. This one's the real deal, Daniels. Harold took a pull of beer. A genuine fan. I was hoping Kevin and I could get a picture together in front of the Grizzly. Once again, she brought out the bright smile, then let her gaze sweep the table. Then I'd love one with all of you. Kevin glanced at his friends, waited for their nods of agreement. Sure. Let me get my friend to take it. Even as she pulled her phone from her purse, she motioned to Amos. Before he reached the table, she held out the Sharpie to Kevin and asked him to sign her jersey just above her left breast. He'd barely finished when Amos reached them and took her phone. At his questioning look, she smiled. First with me and Kevin in front of the Grizzly. Just do a burst. Then one of me with all 3 of these amazing players. How you doing? Kevin stared at Amos for a long moment, as if trying to place him. Good. JR held the phone carelessly in one hand. You? Happy to help your girlfriend get her pictures. She's a huge Grizzlies fan. Amos stepped back. This means a lot to her. Britt used her experience staging photos in ways that sparked interest to full advantage. With Amos at the camera controls and her directing, it didn't take long. Thanks a bunch, guys. She flashed a brilliant smile when they returned to their table. I'll be rooting for you this season. Look for me online at Britt Apple. She shifted her gaze to Kevin. Take care of that shoulder. When they reached their table, Amos cocked his head. How do you know about his shoulder? Britt rolled her eyes. There are no secrets in Cyberland. Amos smiled. I'm getting hungry. Want to go somewhere and get some real food? She knew there was food to be had here, but understood. The bar, while fun, was noisy. Hitting 3 in a night reminded her of her college days. While the protein shake she'd downed before leaving her new apartment had been excellent, Britt found herself suddenly ravenous. As the crowd erupted in cheers, she leaned across the table so he could hear her answer. It was a mistake to get so close, she realized, as she lifted her face and found her mouth less than an inch from his. The faint scent of his cologne wrapped around her like a lover's caress. She swallowed against a suddenly dry throat and moistened her lips with the tip of her tongue. What do you have in mind? Chapter 5. What JR, or rather Amos, had in mind was kissing Britt. He tamped down the urge by reminding himself the purpose was to get to know her better, which made prolonging the evening not only appropriate, but essential. He didn't count the time they'd spent together in the bar. There hadn't been much opportunity for conversation, although her drive to succeed had come through loud and clear. "Do you like carnivals?" He inclined his head. "Carnivals?" Suspicion filled her baby blues. "The Denver County Fair started today. There's always a wide variety of food trucks there." JR gave her what he hoped was an enticing smile. "Are the fairgrounds close?" Not far." JR gestured down the street. "My truck is nearby. We can be there in 10 minutes. The truck belonged to his friend, David Boone. He and Boone traded vehicles each time JR went out as Amos. Though JR had a new Dodge Ram in his arsenal, he preferred vintage for Amos. And Boone, well, he was always eager to trade his 2006 Ford F-150 pickup for JR's new BMW Z4. Britt hesitated. "Could we walk?" "It's a little too far for that." JR studied her tense expression. "If you're uncomfortable riding with me, I get it. We can find something else to do that's really close." Tapping two fingers against her lips, Britt appeared to consider the option. "You work at Silver Creek, so I guess you're not totally guy off the street." JR took that as a yes. Once they reached the truck and were settled in, Britt pulled out her phone. After taking a quick shot of the license plate on the truck, she began posting the pictures she'd taken earlier. Britt slanted a glance in his direction. "If you turn out not to be who you say you are, the police will know where I've been and who I've been with." "I'm totally trustworthy," he assured her, pulling out of the parking garage. "That said, I'd prefer you not post the shot you took of me." "No worries. I'd never post a pic of someone without clearing it with them first. I know not everyone likes living their life online. My sister, for example, is super private." JR thought of her sister, Bea, and the conversations he'd had with her. The two women couldn't be more different. Bea moved in the slow lane. Britt's foot was on the gas, and it was full speed ahead. Deciding to remain silent so she could concentrate on what she was doing, JR admitted he'd found Britt's energy as appealing as Britt herself. It wasn't simply her looks, though she was definitely off the charts hot. The denim she wore this evening hugged her figure and showed off her long legs to full advantage. The admiring, okay, slightly lascivious, thoughts those swaying hips had brought to mind as they made the short trip to the parking garage surprised him. Reminding himself that his job was to find out if she had bad intentions toward his grandmother or the family, kept his attraction to a slow burn. So far, JR was impressed by her. He liked the privacy boundaries she set, and that she was cautious in regard to strangers. Those were the kinds of qualities he'd want for someone who spent time around Hal. "There." She nodded in satisfaction. "That's done." "You're amazing." "I have my moments," she drawled, then wrinkled her nose. It made him laugh. Her lips were as bright and red as ripe strawberries, and altogether too appealing. "Several men were checking you out earlier." "What can I say?" She chuckled. "This shirt is a guy magnet." He thought it went beyond the shirt. "A couple were walking over, but I gave them the stink eye, and they backed off." The truth was, JR didn't blame them. What guy wouldn't want her, with her shiny blonde hair hanging loose to her shoulders and the black jersey fitted to her slim frame? He slanted a glance in her direction when she didn't respond. "Apologies if I overstepped." "They deserved the stink eye." She shook her head. "They could see we were together. I'm glad you ran them off." JR kept the conversation general until he'd parked the truck and they entered the fairgrounds. Britt stopped just inside the gate and slowly turned in a circle. It's been years since I've been to a county fair, but it's like nothing has changed. The smells and sounds are the same. She squeezed his arm, the gesture surprising him. Thanks for suggesting this. I can get so caught up in what I'm doing, I don't stop and just enjoy. As they walked the midway, JR found her enthusiasm for the event infectious. Though he knew money for her was tight, he liked that she insisted on paying her share. He studied the swirling pink and blue cotton candy, which was their dessert after 2 street tacos. JR grinned. When in Rome. There's the Ferris wheel! Britt grabbed his hand and dragged him in the direction of the ride, glittering with lights. JR wasn't a fan of heights. That had caused him some issues initially on ski lifts. The enclosed ones weren't a problem. It was the chairlifts, much like the carts on a Ferris wheel, that could still induce panic. Her hand remained in his as the attendant lifted the bar and settled it across their laps. The Ferris wheel gave a jerk. JR's heart tripped. He tightened the fingers of his free hand around the bar and told himself to relax. The car moved slowly upward, then stopped to let the next couple on. His heart continued to hammer, and he had to force his breath to stay steady. Shifting slightly in his seat to face her, he concentrated on her as the car gave another jerk. She had freckles, he realized, a light sprinkling across her nose. Tell me about your new job. He was thankful his voice came out steady. It's only temporary. I'm working for Halcyon Driscoll. Britt's lips curved. She's one amazing woman. The cart jerked again as they inched up into the vast sky. JR did not look down. He'd learned long ago it was best not to focus on the increasing distance between where he was and the ground. The Halcyon Driscoll? JR put surprise into his voice. Britt's lips twitched. When you say it like that, you make her sound formidable, which she is, but in a totally wonderful way. Have you met her? I've run across her at Silver Creek a time or two. Then you know how amazing she is. How did you manage to snag a job like that? He barely got the question out when the car lurched upward once again. I ran into Hal at Silver Creek. We started talking and hit it off. Britt tilted her head back and looked up at the sky. She offered me a job. What were you doing at Silver Creek? JR ignored the panic clawing at his throat. Just keep focused on Britt and the story, he told himself. She expelled a breath. Okay, but you have to keep this just between us. Promise? Gazing into her blue eyes, he nodded. Focusing on her was actually making this ride not so torturous. JR even found himself capable of an encouraging smile. The person I told you about, whose name I put down as a reference on my job application, is J.R. Driscoll, Hal's grandson. He kept his expression impassive and inclined his head. Is that why you're getting to know Mrs. Driscoll? So she'll help you with him and getting the job? Her fist slamming into his arm was nothing compared to the Ferris wheel's sudden descent. J.R. inhaled sharply and shut his eyes. That's a lousy thing to say. Britt's voice reverberated with anger. I would never use anyone like that. He said nothing, could say nothing. Fear sluiced through his veins. Okay, it is uncool how I put JR's name down, but only because I needed to get the application submitted and I felt sure I'd get to know him before the interview. Britt paused to take a breath. But I would never take advantage of Hal's kindness. In fact, she offered to go to JR and plead my case. I told her no. Why? He managed to spit out. That's between me and JR. I won't put her in the middle. As if finding her rhythm, Britt continued. Hal is proud of being self-made. She told me she admires me for forging my own path. Her grandchildren... Her grandchildren what? He prompted. She shook her head. That's between me and her." JR wondered just what his grandmother could have possibly said about him and his siblings. He didn't ask because the wheel swooped down to the bottom, then started up again. "I'm sorry," he told her. "I shouldn't have insinuated you would use someone like that."
"I get it." She spoke in a matter-of-fact tone. "You don't know me." He wanted to protest, but wasn't that what tonight was about? They were nearly at the top, which meant the descent was only seconds away again. Britt leaned back. "Don't you just love the feel of the wind in your hair?" The last thing JR wanted was to talk about the ride they were on. It was bad enough enduring it. His stomach churned, and he regretted eating the tacos and cotton candy. "You don't look so good." Britt narrowed her gaze and scooted so close her thigh pressed against his. "What's wrong?"
"Nothing."
He spoke through gritted teeth, preparing for the descent. Instead, the wheel came to a halt with their car at the top, swinging wildly. JR tightened his fingers around the bar so much his knuckles turned white. He felt her touch his bicep. "Tell me." Admitting any weakness was repugnant to him. His father was a big one for facing your fears, but JR's attempts to master this beast had failed miserably. When he'd been a boy, he'd told himself not liking ski chairlifts wasn't a big deal. He'd forced himself to ride them when there was no other option. He thought of all the women he'd dated. None of them had known he had this fear. That's how he liked it. "Amos." Britt's voice was as warm as the body now pressed against his side. "Do heights bother you?" Not, are you scared of heights, but simply, do heights bother you? And, JR reminded himself, she'd asked Amos, not JR. He nodded.
"Since I was a boy. Going up isn't bad as long as I don't look. It's the coming down."
When he realized they hadn't moved for nearly a minute, he nearly looked down.
"Is something wrong with this thing?"
"I think so." The blue eyes that met his were soft with understanding. "They'll get it fixed." Though he knew he shouldn't look, the urge to try to see what was happening on the ground was strong. Britt's palm on his cheek had his gaze fixing on her face. "There's no need to look anywhere else but at me." She smiled and then kissed him on the lips, gently, sweetly.
He smiled. "What was that for?"
"You trusted me enough to share something personal and private with me. That means a lot to me." Her eyes took on an impish gleam. "And because I've been waiting to kiss you all night."
"You have?"
She laughed and nodded. "If we spend much more time up here, I may have to do it again." Slowly, cautiously, he slid an arm around her shoulders. JR realized that as long as the car didn't rock and he didn't look down, he was fine.
"What if this time I kissed you?"
"I'd like that." She shifted ever so slightly and placed her hands on his shoulders, tilting her face up. His gaze traveled slowly over her face. He closed his lips over hers and forgot everything in the pleasure of the contact. She tasted like the most delicious candy he'd ever eaten, and he couldn't get enough. Her hands moved up, fingers threading through his hair. The kisses remained warm and sweet, yet at the same time, they were oddly intimate. There was no rush, just her soft lips pressed against his. His heart picked up speed, and JR tightened his hold around her, wanting her closer, needing her. A sudden grinding sound, followed by a sharp jolt, had the car careening back and forth, then moving downward. Her hands moved from his shoulders to wrap around his neck, as if she wanted to soothe him. She planted a kiss at the base of his throat, the simple gesture somehow as erotic as it was comforting. The bar suddenly lifted. Fear stabbed, until JR saw they were at the bottom.
Time to get out, lovebirds. The attendant, a bald man with a noticeable paunch, snickered and made a come-ahead motion with his hand. Britt shot him a saucy smile. Thanks for the extra time at the top. He grinned back. Any time, pretty lady. As soon as JR's feet hit the ground, he felt himself steady. Well, that was fun. Britt slanted a glance at him. You did great. That was all she said about his fear. No teasing, no belaboring the issue. Britt Appleton, he was beginning to realize, had a generous spirit. He could see why his grandmother liked her. He probably should tell her who he was, but if he did, things would turn weird between them. JR was enjoying her company too much to let that happen. As long as he was Amos, she could get to know him, and she would be free to be herself. Besides, even if he vouched for her, JR already knew what his father would say. One day at the fair was not enough to ascertain a person's character, which meant he needed to spend more time with her. He took her hand as they strolled. Britt slanted a sideways glance at him. There's one more ride I want to go on. Does it involve being up in the air? This one is super tame. Her cheeks flushed a pretty shade of pink. I just have a love affair with carousels. He soon found himself in line behind a group of mothers and their kids. I want the one that looks like a bear. Her glittering eyes reminded him of violets. You can take a pic of me on it. Always thinking of work. He shook his head, his tone teasing. Not always. She batted her lashes. When we were at the top of the Ferris wheel, the only thing I was thinking of was kissing. By the time they rode the carousel, grabbed a funnel cake, and he won her a stuffed snake at the ring toss, JR was having a hard time recalling when he'd had more fun. Do you have to work on weekends? He asked when they reached the parking lot. Nope. Britt smiled. My work for Hal is strictly a Monday through Friday gig. Want to get together tomorrow? I have the day free, and I already have plans. Regret blanketed her face before her expression brightened. Maybe you could join me. Pulling out her phone, she let her fingers fly over the display. There's room. Room? I signed up for a walking tour of the Victorian homes in the Capitol Hill area. Her tone turned enticing. Do you know, the Capitol Hill neighborhood has been voted one of the top 10 most beautiful neighborhoods in the country? The reviews for this particular tour group are stellar. They'll provide information not only about the houses, but about the people who once lived in them. JR had grown up in Denver. He was familiar with the mansions in that neighborhood. Many of his parents' friends lived in the historic district. He'd never considered taking a tour. And why hadn't he? He liked history, and walking with Britt on a bright summer day while learning more about the city he called home would be an enjoyable experience. I'm sold. What time should I pick you up? Let's meet there. I'll register you, so we'll be ready to go. He thought about protesting that it would be no problem to pick her up, then decided it'd be best to steer clear of Silver Creek. While Britt hadn't recognized him, Hal and Johnny had seen his Amos look before. Where does the tour start? In front of Archer Tower Apartments at 901 Sherman Street. 10 a.m. I'll be there. Britt surprised him by turning back to kiss him before stepping into the truck. JR whistled under his breath as he rounded the front of the truck, which was strange. He couldn't recall the last time he'd whistled. Chapter 6. Britt glanced at her phone. The tour would start in 5 minutes, and Amos hadn't yet shown up. She hadn't heard from him since he'd dropped her off last night. Her breath came out in a whoosh when she spotted him striding up the sidewalk in khaki cargo shorts and a white polo. She'd dressed equally casually in a pair of red capris and a white and blue sleeveless top. The smile that broke out over his face when he saw her sent tingles up her spine.
She lifted a hand and returned his smile. "Amos is here," she told Tasha, the young woman leading the tour. "Excellent." The brunette glanced at her clipboard. "We're now all here." "Right on time, Mr. Lee," Tasha called to Amos. "We're ready to start." The tour guide went through the basics, then added, "An interesting side note is that the area we'll be touring has been documented as the most haunted neighborhood in the city of Denver." Ooh, ghosts. Britt fairly quivered with excitement. She loved all things spooky. Amos flashed a smile. "If you're scared, you can hold my hand." "I'm more excited than frightened, but I'll hold your hand anyway." Britt slipped her hand into his. When he laced his fingers with hers, she nearly sighed. She couldn't recall the last time she'd felt so comfortable around a man. Mars, her last boyfriend, hadn't liked holding hands, and she'd certainly never been totally comfortable around him. More on edge, like she had to be fun and flirty and on every second they were together. The group walked a block, then turned onto East 10th Avenue and stopped in front of the Crawford Hill Mansion. This French Renaissance Revival-style mansion is made of brick and sandstone with iconic columns and a mansard roof. Tasha gestured with one hand toward the home built in 1906. Britt listened as Tasha detailed Louise Hill's rise to become Denver's social leader. The woman had ruled over Denver's social elite for over 30 years. They heard about the Sacred 36 and how the unveiling of the life-size statue of a nude woman holding a bouquet of Easter lilies signaled the start of Denver's social season each spring.
"Louise sounds a lot like you,"
Amos murmured into her ear. Britt pulled her brows together. She'd much prefer if he compared her to Crawford Hill's mother, one of the original founders of the YWCA, than Louise. "Louise was a tyrant," she whispered back. According to Tasha, Louise was immortalized in the musical The Unsinkable Molly Brown for working to keep Mrs. Brown out of Denver society. "I'm not sure I like the comparison."
"I was referring to her determination."
Amos might have said more, but caught Tasha staring. By the time they reached the Croak-Patterson-Campbell mansion on East 11th Avenue, Britt's head swam with all sorts of fascinating historical facts. Amos appeared genuinely interested and asked a couple of pertinent questions, one about one home's architecture and the other a comment about Thomas Bernard Croak. "I was just about to get to that, so thank you for asking." Tasha shot him a warm smile. Thomas Bernard Croak was the son of Irish immigrants. He moved to Denver and got a job as a clerk in the carpet department of the Daniels and Fisher department store downtown. In a clear, pleasant voice, Tasha spoke in depth about the rise of Thomas Croak from clerk to store owner. That store eventually earned him enough to build an $18,000 brick and stone mansion at the corner of East 11th Avenue and Pennsylvania Street. Britt's ears pricked when she heard about workers uncovering old newspapers, children's clothing, and eyeglasses when they knocked down walls during a 2011 renovation. Her eyes met Amos's when Tasha mentioned workers insisting they saw ghostly figures of children and heard strange voices. "In 2013, the Patterson Inn opened in this lovely home. It's a wonderful place to stay if you get a chance." Tasha scanned the group and did a quick head count. "Our final stop will be a Sherman Tower penthouse, which is 15 stories above Denver. You'll get amazing views of the city and the Rocky Mountains, including Pikes Peak and Long's Peak." The group moved after Tasha, but Britt lagged behind. "Are you interested in seeing the penthouse?"
"Not really."
"Let me text Tasha and tell her we're bowing out of the rest of the tour." Britt's fingers flew over her phone screen. "Good, that's done."
"Where do we go now?"
"I'd like to check out the rooms at the Patterson Inn." When he made several spooky sounds, she poked him in the belly. "I love places that are haunted. Maybe we can see if they'd let us look at one of the rooms.
I don't have the money to stay there, but once I get the job with the Grizzlies, I might spring for a celebratory night. What about me? What about you? I'd love to be part of your celebration. Her lips curved. Maybe. We'll have to wait and see. Climbing the front steps of the Patterson Inn, JR watched an older man key in a code, then hold the door open for the woman with him. JR grabbed the door before it shut, then took Britt's arm as they stepped out of the sunlight into the elegance. From the hand-carved oak stairway to the stained glass windows, the lobby of the Patterson Inn impressed. Still, JR found himself watching Britt rather than looking around. He'd attended numerous social events here, but it was a treat seeing the place through her eyes. She didn't seem so much awed as curious, her gaze taking in the impressive stairway and the shiny hardwood floors. Britt smiled, then gestured to two women playing chess at a small table. "Do you play?" JR hesitated, then reminded himself he wanted to be as truthful as possible. "I do. How about you?" "I love the game. I had a roommate in college who played. When she told me it builds critical thinking and prediction skills, I decided to give it a try. I've been playing ever since." She smiled. "I like that everyone is equal when the match starts. By making good, solid moves, you have a chance to win." "I enjoy the strategy," JR admitted. "We'll have to play sometime." "I'd like that." Britt peeked into a room that staff appeared to be readying for a small private event. Tables covered in pristine white linen held china, silver, and crystal. Fresh flowers served as centerpieces. Tulle bows with roses decorated the chair backs. "Looks like it's being set up for a wedding reception," JR observed. "Elegantly simple." Britt gave an approving nod. "Is this the kind of wedding reception you'd want?" he asked. Confusion blanketed her face. "Small and intimate?" He gestured with one hand to the room. "Or would you go for the big splash?" Britt laughed. "Aren't you the funny one?" "I thought every little girl dreams of her wedding." "Well, this woman dreams of getting a job." She shot him a rueful smile. "I don't have a boyfriend, and I'm not looking for one. My focus is on getting a job." "You have a job," he reminded her. "With Halcyon Driscoll." "It's temporary," she reminded him. "Hal needs extra help while everyone is moving in, and some extra push on social media for Silver Creek. Once that's done, the job will be history." "It sounds as if she likes you." Amos kept his tone offhand. "I bet you could convince her to keep you on." Britt frowned. "That would be using her. I wouldn't do that." "Not even if you had nowhere else to go and no other job?" JR pushed just a little. "I take care of myself, and I don't use my friends." Britt stiffened, and he swore he saw disappointment in her blue depths. "Is that what you think of me? Or maybe that's what you'd do in my place?" "No," he said honestly. "I can't see you doing that, but I've met plenty who would. Just so you know, I wouldn't use a friend like that either." "Okay." She blew out a breath. "Okay, then." "Shall we check out one of the rooms?" JR asked, eager to change the subject. "I hope they'll let us look." "May I help you?" Britt jumped at the male voice behind them. "Busted!" JR turned, wishing he wasn't wearing cargo shorts and that he didn't have all this hair. Britt stepped forward and extended her hand to the well-dressed, balding gentleman. "Hi, I'm Brittany Appleton. This is my friend Amos Lee. You have a lovely place here. I'm impressed." It was evident she had this under control. JR was so accustomed to being in charge that it chafed to stand back and let her take the lead. Because the need to take over pushed at him, he stepped a few feet away to observe the chess game. Still, he kept one eye on Britt. JR saw the man's hesitation ease as Britt continued to talk, smiling and gesturing.
JR was contemplating seeing if there was anything he could do when the man handed her a key. "Thank you, Leon. We won't be but a minute." JR followed her as she moved to the stairs. "There's an elevator to the second floor, but the room I'm looking at, Prague, is up another short flight of steps. We might as well forego the elevator and take the stairs." Her voice radiated excitement, and she talked fast. "Leon said normally they don't allow this, but I told him exactly what was going on."
"What exactly is going on?"
JR asked as he climbed the steps beside her. "You know, that I'm waiting for a new job to come through, and I'm thinking of renting a room here as a gift to myself when I get the call saying the job is mine, but I want to check out the room in person." He stared at her in amazement. Somehow she'd managed to get all that out without taking a breath. When they reached the second floor, they kept going. JR glanced around. He'd never taken the time to fully admire the quality of the renovations. "Leon gave me an actual key." Britt held it up and grinned. "It's crazy how having a piece of heavy copper in my hand, rather than a flimsy key card, adds to the experience." Stopping in front of the room labeled Prague, she slipped the key into the lock, then pushed the door open. JR guessed the room to be a little under 1,000 square feet. Though nowhere near the size of the suites he stayed in when traveling, it was striking. The hand-carved wood furniture and wrought iron detailing added a European castle feel to the room. The four-poster bed sat under a ceiling that soared at least 25 feet. A flat-screen TV and a charging station were nods to modern sensibilities. "This is quite lovely, and absolutely perfect." Britt nodded in satisfaction, then moved to check out the bathroom. There they found a clawfoot tub that Britt oohed and awed over, as well as a steam shower. JR pictured himself spending the night with her here, enjoying the steam shower and the tub with her. His gaze returned to the four-poster, enjoying the bed with her. Leon mentioned the room rate includes evening wine and hors d'oeuvres and a gourmet breakfast. Britt glanced around the room once again. "I've made up my mind. I'm definitely going to treat myself when I get the job." JR wrapped his arms around her from behind. He nearly asked her again if he could be part of that celebration, but he held his tongue. This room, staying here to celebrate, was her dream. He wouldn't sully the moment by making a move on her. Instead, he kissed her temple, then stepped back. As they left the inn, Britt considered asking Amos if he'd like to come up and see her place in Silver Creek, but that was a huge step she wasn't sure she was ready to take. Electricity hummed in the air, simply with his hand wrapped around hers. There was no denying they'd end up in bed if she invited him up. Not that there was anything wrong with sex between two consenting adults, but she was still getting to know Amos. Though she had to admit what she'd seen of him so far, she liked very much. They passed an ice cream shop, and she experienced a sudden urge for sorbet. "Would you like—" The ringing of his phone silenced the question. It was a strange ringtone, very distinctive, but one she couldn't quite place. Amos released her hand, his dark brows pulling together.
Give me a sec. Hello?"
He listened for several seconds. Britt studied the list of flavors on the windows of the ice cream shop.
"Right now?"
Amos glanced at Britt.
"Sure. I can be there in 30.
Whoever was on the other end of the call did most of the talking. Though Amos kept the phone close to his ear, Britt could hear the deep rumble of a man's voice. Just knowing it wasn't another woman had her relaxing.
"I'm sorry."
He shoved the phone into his pocket.
"Family emergency.
"I didn't realize you have family in town."
Parents."
He shifted, looking uncomfortable, so she let it go. "Totally understand. When I lived in the same town as my folks, my mom expected me to come running each time she called." Britt's lips twisted in a wry smile. A look of regret crossed Amos's face.
"I wasn't ready for our day to end."
"Them's the breaks."
Britt shrugged and forced a light-hearted tone. Do you like art galleries? Britt blinked. First chess, now art galleries? Amos Lee was turning out to be a true Renaissance man. I love them. The Miros Gallery has a solo exhibition tomorrow that's free and open to the public. A watchful look filled his gaze. The artist is a pop urban artist. Her work is very intriguing. Want to go with me? You do realize this will be the third day in a row we've seen each other. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and his voice was just as gentle when he spoke. Is that a problem? Not for me. Britt studied him with a forthright gaze. Do you want me to meet you there? I'll pick you up at 6. He paused. By the front door of Silver Creek. She understood. If he picked her up out front, he wouldn't have to pay for parking. That'll work. They covered several more blocks and were soon back in front of the Archer Tower apartments, where they'd met earlier for the tour. Britt put a hand on his arm. I'll walk from here. I can drop you off. Not necessary. She reached up and brushed his lips with hers. Your family is waiting. He kissed her this time. By the time he released her, Britt's breath came in short puffs. Until tomorrow. Still, he didn't move. Giving him a jaunty wave, she started down the sidewalk. By the time she reached the end of the block and looked back, he was nowhere in sight. Chapter 7. Despite first stopping at his place to change, JR was at his parents' home within the hour. Heading straight to the library, he rapped on the door and waited. From an early age, it had been impressed upon him and his siblings to never enter this room without first receiving permission. Come in. JR pushed the door open into the space his father used as a home office. What a space it was, with a gilt-coffered ceiling, ceramic-tiled fireplace, and shelves of books. A Persian rug covered the shiny hardwood in the sitting area. Ross looked up from his tablet as JR entered. The silver peppering his thick, dark hair only made him look more distinguished and formidable. When he smiled, pushed back his chair, and rose, he was the dad JR remembered, the one who'd taught him how to throw a slider, the one who'd encouraged him to be the best at whatever he attempted. I'm glad you could make it. Ross rounded the desk and extended his hand, almost as if they were business associates instead of father and son. You made it sound urgent. As JR shook his father's hand, he noticed the lines of strain around his eyes. Not urgent, but I'm ready for an update on your meeting with William DeVell. Ross gestured toward a bar tower nestled between shelves of books. Can I get you something to drink? Not right now, thanks. Instead of taking a seat facing his father's gorgeous antique desk, JR chose a burgundy leather chair positioned near the fireplace. I'm not eager for winter, but I find myself wishing there was a fire crackling in the hearth. That time will be here before we know it. Grabbing his tablet, his father moved to take the chair beside JR. Before he even sat, Ross had the non-disclosure agreement pulled up. Diving directly into the business matter at hand didn't bother JR. When there was work to be done, Ross Driscoll considered excessive socializing to be a waste of time and energy. That same attitude had been part of every Driscoll's DNA since Henry Driscoll hit it big in silver mining back in the 1860s. A fierce tenacity and willingness to work hard had brought the family back from financial ruin numerous times over the past 150 years. When silver mining hit the skids back in 1893, Henry and his old friend Charlie Flock pivoted. Pooling their resources, they formed the Ace Rubber Company. Once the company introduced Ace All-Star basketball shoes, money began pouring in. The stock market crash of 1929 led to the company filing for bankruptcy and the aged Henry severing his lifelong friendship with Charlie. In JR's book, the breakup was understandable.
Henry had pushed to pull out of the stock market before the crash, but had been unable to convince Charlie. As their 50-50 arrangement was a true partnership, Henry had been powerless to act without Charlie's agreement. After the crash, there'd been no company assets left to divide. But, as JR's father often said, you can't keep a Driscoll down. The fortune lost in 1929 was regained when Robert Driscoll, JR's great-grandfather, moved into synthetic rubber manufacturing. Between 1940 and 1945, nearly 800,000 tons per year of SBR, or styrene butadiene rubber, was needed for the war effort. It was a case of being in the right industry at the right time, and the family's fortune once again soared. Flush with money, Robert formed Velocity in 1945 and jumped headfirst back into the design, development, and manufacturing of athletics footwear. Before we dive into your meeting with DeVell, I have to admit I'm disappointed in our year-end figures. I realize a 5% increase in sales is respectable, but... Ross scowled. Flock brand sales in North America were up 20% last year. Like Flock, Velocity's fiscal year started in June. Flock Inc. seems to have a good sense for what consumers want to buy. A muscle in Ross's jaw jumped, the way it always did when a flock was mentioned in a positive manner. We had a great year, Dad. Velocity is strong in so many areas. That doesn't mean we can't be stronger. Ross made an impatient gesture with one hand. We need to keep in mind that a 5% increase in direct business on a currency-neutral basis is substantially more when you're starting with $10 billion in sales than a 20% increase if you're starting with Flock's $1.8 billion. His dad gave a reluctant nod. Seeing the continued tension on his father's face, JR kept his tone easy. When they debuted their new Fast Flock Soul, the one using UV lasers, we knew their profits would soar. The Driscolls hadn't been the only family to start out in silver mining and end up in fashion and performance footwear. While the Flock brand wasn't as successful as Velocity, the company had become a hungry predator nipping at their heels. You're not saying anything I don't already know. Ross raked a hand through his hair. But seeing them enjoy such a stellar year still goes down hard. Which just underscores why we have to continue to innovate and get our products to the consumer more quickly. That includes improving our online and in-store shopping experiences. JR leaned forward, letting his passion show. Ross offered a wry smile. I know where this is headed. Lexico is the resource tool we need to successfully navigate the changing waters of consumer preferences, both in product and in shipping. Which brings us to your meeting with DeVell. His father's blue eyes, the color of which JR had inherited, fixed on his son's face. Yesterday, JR had met with William DeVell, the COO of Lexico, a technology company that predicted consumer behavior. Owning a predictive analytics company like Lexico will allow us to improve our strategies of targeting customers directly. We'll know our customers better, so we can offer them better products and services. Ross steepled his fingers beneath his chin. How did the face-to-face with him go? We spent time getting acquainted. Then we moved into the non-disclosure agreement our legal team submitted. His lawyers hadn't yet completed their review. DeVell shouldn't have an issue with the document. The wording is fairly standard. Ross's dark brows pulled together. 30 days is a fair time frame to come to an agreement. My thoughts are the sooner the better. I don't want news of the negotiations getting out to our competitors. JR tapped his fingers on his thigh. DeVell and his co-founders will sell to us. I'm also going to get them to agree to consult with us on an ongoing basis. His father smiled at his confident tone. I suppose you have someone in mind to head this new division? Me, of course. JR kept his tone light, even as his stomach clenched. His father had very definite ideas where his children fit within the company framework. Ross lifted a dark brow.
What about your current position? We're flush with talent in my area. I can give you a list of people who could step up today. Nyla would also be an excellent choice. I need your sister with the Grizzlies. Ross's tone brooked no argument on that point. The energy coursing through JR made sitting difficult. Pushing to his feet, he told himself that convincing his dad he was the person to head this new division was a discussion for another time. I'll have a signed agreement within 30 days. Count on it. You'll make it happen. Ross's watch dinged. He rose and cleared his throat. How are things going with that woman? JR inclined his head. One of Lexico's co-founders was a woman, but DeVell was handling the negotiations. The young one who's been cozying up to your grandmother. Ross's voice was gruff. Tell me what you've discovered so far. I'm getting to know her. She seems legit. I'm not interested in how anything seems. Ross spread his hands. I want to know she's legit. JR thought about Britt. Sometimes what seems suspicious initially can be really quite innocent. His father shot him an incredulous look. You have a detective looking into her background. You do remember what Gran said. She was adamant we not treat her like a criminal. I know what my mother said, and I assume you remember what that Parker woman did. I will not let anyone hurt this family. If you aren't able to handle this, I'll do it myself. I've got the investigation under control. JR hoped his father would be satisfied with the answer. The last thing he wanted was for his dad to sick a PI on Britt. In his heart, JR knew the woman he was getting to know wasn't an opportunist like June had been, or a thief. Britt was a determined young woman intent on forging her own path. She was unlike any woman he'd known. Her spirit reminded him of his grandmother, bold, strong, and forthright. I should have more to report on Monday. Just thinking of spending the afternoon at the art gallery with Britt tomorrow brought a smile to JR's lips. Good. Ross clapped him on the back and walked him to the door. Thanks for stopping by. I hope I didn't interrupt any plans. JR thought of Britt. His plans with her for tomorrow were already firmly in place. Not at all. On Sunday afternoon, after ditching the bag slung over his shoulder into the space behind the driver's seat, JR drove to Silver Creek. The gentlemanly thing to do was to go to Britt's door, but he couldn't risk running into his grandmother. When he pulled into the loading zone in front of the building, he spotted Britt chatting with Sean McCormick. It didn't surprise JR to see the architect. Sean not only worked in the building, he'd leased an apartment in Silver Creek. The instant Britt spotted the truck, she said something to Sean, gave a wave, and hurried to the curb. She was a bright spot of color on a day that held more clouds than blue sky. You look lovely in red, he told her as she slid into the seat and buckled her belt. It's one of my favorite colors, she confided. You don't think I'm too casual, do you? She didn't appear to be fishing for compliments. Sensing genuine concern, he took a moment to study her. Her dress fit close through the waist and hips with a little flare in the skirt. A simple silver necklace with colored stones and heeled sandals added to the picture. You're perfect. You look amazing. This time, it was her turn to study him. Are those Ferragamos? JR stifled a curse. He'd made an effort not to wear any Velocity products. He hadn't even thought of these shoes as being too expensive for a construction worker. They look like Ferragamos, and they're really comfortable. Not a lie, not exactly. JR found it was getting more difficult to hedge with Britt. He wanted to be completely honest with her. About everything. That wouldn't happen until he could go back to his family and assure them that they had nothing to fear from Britt Appleton. You smell terrific. Britt sniffed the air. The scent reminds me of Tom Ford. The woman had the nose of a bloodhound. Tom Ford's private blend was his current favorite. She'd nailed the cologne in one sniff. That's what it's supposed to smell like.
Again, not a lie.
Britt held out her arm.
Tell me what this smells like.
Dutifully, JR inhaled. The fresh, citrusy scent with hints of amberwood and vanilla was the same scent his sister favored.
Dior Ballade Sauvage.
When Britt's eyes widened, he instantly realized his mistake. Suspicion had her brows furrowing.
How do you know that?
My little sister loves the scent. He gave a laugh. She's 5 feet 9 inches and in college, so she probably wouldn't like being called little.
Probably not.
Britt chuckled.
How many sisters do you have?
The short drive was rapidly delving into territory he wanted to avoid. The less said about his family, the better.
I have 2. What about you? Just the one sibling I mentioned, my twin.
She's amazing. Britt's expression softened.
You'd love her. How old?
Looks like this is our lucky day. JR wheeled the truck into a parking spot down the street from the gallery. This is a great spot, and as close as we're going to get. Britt was already out of the truck and on the sidewalk by the time he reached her. One of these days, I'm going to open the door for you. She looped her arm through his. You may be surprised to know that I've been opening my own car door for years. Just trying to be a gentleman.
You don't need to try. I like you just the way you are.
The sentiment, though casually spoken, touched something deep inside JR. And I like you just the way you are.
She gave him a little hip bump. That's why we get along so well.
He arched a brow.
I'm not trying to be what I think you want, and vice versa. We can be ourselves when we're together. That's a gift.
Britt's eyes widened when she saw the number of people waiting to enter the gallery. Sandra Chevalier is a popular artist, JR told her. An article I read said that her portraits, and I quote, are literally torn between the fantastical heroics and iconography of comic books and the harsher underlying tragedy of oppressed female identity and the exposed superficial illusion it conveys. The description had stuck with him and made him understand why his sister Nyla was such a huge fan. Part of the reason he wanted to attend the showing was to see if he could pick up one of her pieces of art for Nyla's upcoming birthday. Coming with Britt meant he'd need to text the gallery owner to hold the piece for him once he found it. Only when they reached the door did JR realize Britt was staring. He raised a hand to his face, brushed at a long strand of hair.
I can't figure you out.
Puzzlement filled her gaze.
You know so much about everything.
I'm interested in a lot of things. That, at least, was the absolute truth. I read a lot about those things that interest me. I'm sure you do the same.
I do. I love to learn and grow.
She lowered her voice as they stepped inside the quiet gallery. In college, I decided I wanted to increase my knowledge of proper social etiquette, so I watched some YouTube videos, then I took a course. Your university offered classes in social etiquette? She laughed, a delightful musical sound.
No, it was a series of 3 classes at a nearby community college.
Did you learn a lot?
I'd already learned a lot from my online research, but in the class, we practiced what we learned.
Her expression turned thoughtful. Want to know the big takeaway? He nodded. If you're hosting a party and someone does something, uses the wrong knife or whatever, you never draw attention to the error. Not that I believe someone would. Sounds like you had a good instructor. Oh, my. Britt brought a hand to her throat as she took in the art displayed on the wall in front of them. So many eyes. It's her thing, JR told Britt. Apparently, Chevalier started out sketching eyes. Windows into the soul. Britt stepped closer to the wall. So expressive. They are. JR studied these works, but nothing jumped out at him as perfect for Nyla. They were in the third room when JR spotted the piece he had to have for his sister. He rubbed his chin as he studied the face. I like this one. It was titled La cage l'espoir n'est pas perdu. Britt inclined her head. I wonder what that means. JR didn't translate. I believe it's a reference to a series of paintings this one belongs to. A perfect title, don't you think? The elderly gentleman who now stood beside Britt mused. Women, especially today, are often surrounded by expectations of perfection. Very true. Britt smiled at the older gentleman, distinguished in his suit with a vest and highly polished shoes. She gestured with one hand toward the piece. The woman's face was covered, except for her eyes and mouth, by a mask adorned with superheroes, the Incredible Hulk positioned in the center of her forehead. This is interesting. How much do you think this one would sell for? While Britt was engaged with the older man, JR texted the gallery owner and purchased the piece for $25,000. I'd put it in the $20,000 to $30,000 range. The gentleman flagged down one of the gallery staff. Celeste, can you tell me how much for this piece? I'm sorry to disappoint you, Dwight, but that particular one has just sold. Perhaps I can interest you. I told this young woman that my best guess is it would go for between $20,000 and $30,000. Dwight smiled warmly, the white mutton chops on his cheeks giving him a cherubic look. I don't think she believed me. You were right in the ballpark, Celeste assured him, then turned to Britt with a friendly smile. Dwight is one of our best customers and very knowledgeable when it comes to art. Celeste glanced at JR. JR kept his expression bland. He and the art sales consultant had gone out a time or two several years back. If you have any questions, Celeste flashed a bright smile. Please don't hesitate to ask. Dwight went one way, while JR steered Britt in another. It didn't take them long to make their way around the gallery. Are you hungry? He asked. I had a protein bar for lunch, she told him, and an apple. Do you like gyros? There's a food truck not far from here that has the best in the city. We could grab one, get something to drink, then head to the park for a game of chess. Chess? I brought my board. He offered her an encouraging smile. It's a beautiful night to play. She smiled. I've never known anyone like you, Amos. Chapter 8. Britt studied the board. They'd each won a game, and this one was now at critical mass. When Amos had said he knew his way around a chessboard, he hadn't lied. The man knew how to play. Then again, so did she. Solid, thoughtful moves, she reminded herself. She had to admit it was difficult to concentrate, being downwind of him. That incredible scent of his cologne teased her nostrils and sent her hormones into overdrive. This man did it all for her. He was fun yet serious, intelligent without being stuffy. She liked the way he treated her. Most guys she'd dated had been all over her on the first date. The funny thing was, with Amos, she wanted him more because he didn't push. Britt forced her attention back to the board. Carefully, she lifted her rook and moved it to f4 to take his pawn. Glancing at her, he moved his king to a2. Not your best move, Amos. She crossed her knight over to c3 and smiled. Check. You think you have me? His tone might be light, but she saw the worry in his eyes. The man was in trouble, and he knew it. Britt predicted his next move to a1 because it was the only way to get his king out of trouble. What he obviously didn't realize was... Rook to b1, she announced, once he'd made the move and his fingers had left the piece. Checkmate. Groaning aloud, he leaned back in his chair. They'd found a spot in the park where tables had been set up for players. In fact, they'd snagged the last open one. Except now, with the sun going down, they were the last of the players. "One more game," Amos urged. "Next time," she promised. "My brain is tired, and so is my butt." She stood and stretched, the movement pulling the fabric of her bodice tight across her chest. When she lowered her arms, she found Amos staring. The heat in his eyes set off an answering fire in her belly. "I suppose I should head home." There were always things to do, though at the moment Britt couldn't think of anything pressing. He hesitated. "I'm not ready to call it a night." "I'm not either, but I think we've accomplished a lot." She held up one hand and ticked off the activities. "We went to the gallery, ate amazing gyros, and played chess. Need I mention that I won 2 out of 3 games?" Amos gave an exaggerated sigh. "See, there's really no reason not to head home." Except, he stepped close. "Neither of us is ready for the night to end." Britt knew they'd both been stepping around the issue. "I could invite you up to my place." Playing with fire, she told herself, but at the moment, she didn't care. The look that flared in his eyes told her he knew exactly what she was offering. For a second, she thought he would agree. Then he shook his head. Better not." Feeling foolish, she pasted on a smile. "Well, then Do you like going to the movies?" This conversation was giving her whiplash. Depends on what's playing." Let me rephrase. Does the idea of sitting in a dark room beside me appeal to you? I can toss in popcorn, candy, and sodas as extra inducements, if necessary, to sweeten the offer. Britt's smile came easy now. "I'd love to go to the movies with you." Amos gathered up his chessboard and pieces and put them carefully into a battered messenger bag. "We'll drop these off in the truck, then walk to the theater. It isn't far, only a couple of blocks from here. The place shows vintage films nonstop on the weekends." "And you know this because—" He surprised her with a quick kiss on the mouth. "Because I saw it on the marquee on our way to the park." She nodded her approval. Observant as well as handsome. "You think I'm handsome?" Amos touched the beard, an odd look in his eyes. "With all this hair?" "I'm normally not big on facial hair, but on you it works." She looped her arm through his as they strode to the truck. "Besides, it's the man you are inside, under all that hair, that matters. That guy is smokin' hot." He laughed. "Thank you for the compliment. You are very welcome." Amos carefully stowed the chessboard and pieces behind the driver's seat. He covered the bag with a blanket stowed there. "Do you have a dog?" "No. Why?" "The blanket is full with dog hair. It smells like a dog, too." Amos grimaced. "You're right." "How do you think that happened?" "My friend uses this truck often, so it's likely his dog." Amos waved a dismissive hand. "Enough about the dog. Let's talk what kind of candy you want. Junior mints are my favorite." The stunning beauty of the vintage theater took Britt's breath away. She'd taken a design course in college and fallen head over heels for Art Deco. She knew this building's exterior fell into the zigzag design trend, characterized by angular patterns and stylized geometry. "I've only seen a building in the Art Deco Mayan revival style in books." Britt craned her neck back to look at the Mayan warrior, chieftain, at the top of the soaring tower out front. "This theater is one of 3 in the country, originally designed in that style." Amos put his hand against the small of her back as they moved to the ticket window. Mayan revival, as you likely know, was popular in the 1920s and 1930s. Frank Lloyd Wright built several homes in Southern California utilizing this style. His comments concurred with what she'd learned in class. One more thing that solidified Amos Lee was well-versed on a wide variety of topics. 2 tickets, please." Amos handed a 20 to the young man in the booth. Britt dug into her purse. "I'm paying my share." Amos held up a hand that now held 2 tickets. "Buy me a soda, and we'll be even." Frustrated, Britt frowned. "I won't have you spending all your money on me. You have to eat, too." "I'm doing okay. But," he added quickly, "if you want to split it, that's what we'll do." The argument she'd been formulating in her head disappeared in a rush of gratitude. This guy got her like no one ever had. Deal. The snack bar in the lobby was as cute and decorative as the building's exterior. A teenage girl stood behind the shiny glass counter. "What would you like?" Britt asked Amos. "Wanna split a jumbo popcorn?" "Absolutely." Britt nodded. "What kind of soda do you want?" By the time they left the counter, they each held a soda. Britt's fingers curved around a box of Junior Mints, while Amos's arm encircled the popcorn. She'd planned to pay for all the treats, but Amos argued that if they were indeed sharing expenses, he needed to toss more money into the mix. They climbed the stairs to the second floor to a small theater featuring an independent foreign film. "I absolutely love this theater." She breathed out the words, keeping her voice low before realizing she needn't have bothered. They were the only ones viewing this particular film. Amos gestured with his head toward the screen. "Looks like we missed the beginning." "I'm here for the decorative paneling and the snacks," Britt admitted. "I'm here because I wanted to spend more time with you." Britt's lips curved around the straw as she took a drink. Once again, she and this amazing man were in perfect sync. After conversation over popcorn, candy, and drinks, they set the snacks aside. The air between them crackled and took on a kind of watchful waiting. Britt's heart rate quickened. Amos's arm slipped around her shoulders, and she shifted slightly in her seat. When his mouth closed over hers, his lips were warm and sweet, tasting of chocolate and mint. Britt wrapped her arms loosely around his neck as they continued to kiss. She'd kissed her share of men, but no one who stirred her senses like this one did. A languid heat filled her body. She slid her fingers into his hair and opened her mouth when his tongue swept across her lips. She pushed herself even closer to him. A fire ignited low in her belly. Britt didn't want the armrest between them. Heck, she didn't want clothes between them. She heard herself groan, a sound of want and need that had her jerking back. "What's wrong?" he asked, and she heard the concern. She rested her forehead against his, her breath coming in short puffs. "We've got to slow down. If not, I'm going to start pulling off clothes and embarrass us both." "Wouldn't embarrass me." Chuckling, he kissed the tip of her nose. If she hadn't heard the desire in his low, husky voice, she might have regretted the honesty. At least now she knew she wasn't the only one who wanted more. Britt didn't regret pulling back. Oh, maybe a little. Okay, a lot. But she'd rushed into relationships before, and it had never gone well. Whatever this was with Amos, she wanted to take her time and savor it. Speaking of savoring, she picked up the box of candy and held it out to him. "Can I interest you in a Junior Mint?" Laughing, he lifted the box from her fingers. "Sit and enjoy your coffee and muffin." Hal slanted a glance at Britt. "That's not a request, it's an order." Britt lifted a hand in acknowledgement, then finished arranging the contents of the last few baskets to accommodate the muffins. She and Hal had spent the morning baking gluten-free, dairy-free banana chocolate chip muffins for today's welcome baskets. Now the muffins needed to cool. "Sit down, now, Brittany." Hal pointed to the stool beside her at the breakfast bar. "Your coffee is getting cold." "Yes, ma'am." Britt gave a mock salute and dropped onto the stool. Her fingers curved around the mug of steaming coffee. "This smells so good." "It's snickerdoodle," Hal told her, "a personal favorite." Britt took a sip and breathed out. "Perfect." We haven't had much chance to talk. Hal inclined her head. Did you have a nice weekend? I did. Britt thought about the weekend. The time she and Amos spent together had been simply magical. I recognize the look in your eyes. Hal sipped her coffee and studied Britt over the rim. It usually means a man is involved. Did you meet someone? Britt smiled. Remember last week when I told you I was going to check out several Grizzlies bars? Hal slowly nodded. I ran into this guy at Uncle Joe's. Britt stared dreamily into her cup. Then we went to the county fair. The fair? The startled surprise in Hal's voice had Britt grinning. It was fun. Britt tried to keep her tone casual, but couldn't quite pull it off. The night was lovely. Just enough of a breeze to keep any bugs at bay. We walked and talked, ate funnel cakes and cotton candy. We rode the Ferris wheel and then the carousel. That sounds like a wonderful night. Britt broke off a bite of muffin, nodded as she chewed. Do you think you'll see this young man again? After a long drink of coffee, Britt responded. I've seen him several times since. He came with me on a walking tour I had already scheduled on Saturday. The tour wasn't full, so it worked out. What tour was this? Capitol Hill? So many beautiful homes. Britt sighed. My favorite was the Croak-Patterson-Campbell mansion. It's now the Patterson Inn. Britt looked to Hal. Do you know that one? I do. It's a lovely property. I'm going to stay there as a treat to myself when I get the Grizzlies job. Hal crumbled little bits of muffin between her fingertips, a tiny frown between her brows. Speaking of the job, has my grandson gotten in touch with you yet? No. She lifted a hand when Hal opened her mouth, knowing what the woman planned to say. I've got it under control. I left another message this morning. Please, please, I know you want to help, but it's important to me that I handle this on my own. Hal expelled a breath, then smiled. I will respect your wishes. Thank you. Now, back to your young man. He's not my young man, Hal, Britt protested half-heartedly. Though I really enjoy being with him. Did you go anywhere with him Saturday night? No, he had something going on. A date? Hal asked. I don't know. I got the impression it was some kind of family thing. Britt waved a dismissive hand. But we got together on Sunday. We went to an art gallery. Which one? Britt brought 2 fingers to her lips and tapped. The Mirrors? I know that one well. Hal gave an approving nod. Was that your idea or his? His. Britt smiled, thinking of the exhibition. They had this pop urban artist, Sandra Chevalier. I know her work, Hal exclaimed. You do? Nyla loves her portraits. Britt filed away that little fun fact about her future boss. Chevalier's pieces are interesting. Hal chuckled. Not your cup of tea. The eyes are amazing. So well done. Britt recalled the piece that had captured Amos's interest. There was this one. It was fabulous. But do you know what the price was? How much? It sold for between $20,000 and $30,000. Britt chuckled. She knew there were people who spent that much and more on art, but not anyone she knew. What about after the art gallery? Hal prompted. The older woman's eyes gleamed with curiosity. Britt lifted her coffee cup. You're going to pry every last detail out of me. Is that it? Oh, my darling girl. I would never pry. Hal chuckled. Not when all I need to do is ask. All that Britt left out from her description of the rest of Sunday's activities was the kissing in the theater, but Hal appeared more interested in the chess game. We used to have family chess tournaments when the grandchildren were growing up. Hal's expression grew soft with memories. Johnny and I still play. The things you learn about someone,
Britt mused later as she loaded up the baskets containing the muffins and headed down to the 4th floor. Since it was during the day, most of the tenants were at work. Britt added a pre-written note to the baskets and set them in front of the doors. Her phone buzzed as she set the last one in front of a door.
"How's your Monday going?"
Amos. Britt smiled. Good, but not as much fun as the weekend.
"We'll have to do it again. Soon."
Britt debated how to reply. She wanted him to know she was interested, but didn't want to appear too eager.
Screw it,
she finally thought. She typed out the message, sending it before she could change her mind. Chapter 9. The return message that popped up on JR's phone had him leaning back in his desk chair and smiling. He read the text again. I'd like that very much. He'd woken up this morning thinking of her and wondering how long he should wait before contacting her. Then he'd decided he was too old for games and gave in to temptation. Now he needed to think of a suitable date for her and Amos.
"You look like you're working hard."
David Boone, corporate attorney and old friend, strolled into the room and dropped the key fob to JR's BMW onto the desk with a clatter. JR pulled the truck keys from his pocket and tossed them to Boone. If JR didn't know the guy had an amazing legal mind, he'd never peg him as a corporate attorney. With his messy mop of brown hair, perpetual facial scruff, and irreverent attitude, he was definitely the odd duck on the Driscoll legal team. Boone was also one of JR's oldest friends. His quick wit and propensity for practical jokes were only two of the things JR liked about the guy.
"Mrs. Sweet didn't let me know you were here. I bribed her with a box of saltwater taffy I brought back from Cape Cod."
Boone took a sip from the water bottle in his hand.
"It's a favorite of hers." "She told you that?"
JR asked, not bothering to hide his skepticism. Elvira Sweet had been his father's PA for decades. While she'd been out for hip surgery several years back, his dad had reluctantly replaced her. Granted, her recovery had taken twice as long as originally anticipated, and even when she returned to the office, she hadn't been at full speed. Though JR had no doubt his father would have found a place for the widow in the organization, JR felt she deserved better than to feel cast aside in her early 60s for a younger model. He'd persuaded her to come work for him, convinced her he needed her skills, her knowledge, her loyalty. It was all true. Other than family, there was no one he trusted more.
"We both know Sweet doesn't chat or confide."
Boone dropped into the chair in front of JR's desk.
"I spotted some taffy in this decorative bowl on her desk a couple of months ago. I watched the contents dwindling each time I stopped by."
Boone tapped his temple with his index finger.
"My brilliant powers of deduction concluded she was the one eating the stash." "You're a smart one. Brilliant would be a better descriptor."
Boone unwrapped a piece of blue taffy and held it out to JR. JR shook his head.
"What's with the burner phone?"
Boone pointed to the phone lying on JR's desk before popping the taffy into his mouth. JR would confide, but only to a point.
"I met a woman last week when I went out as Amos. We got together again this weekend. I wondered why I got to keep the Z4 all weekend."
The attorney sat up straight in his chair, dropping his burnished leather Oxfords, which he'd just propped on the desk, to the floor, as realization dawned.
"You met a woman as Amos. Then you went out with her again as Amos. You never do that." "Sure I do." "Nope, you never do."
Boone's voice brooked no argument.
"You go out with him for one night. That's it."
Boone's gaze grew thoughtful.
"You gave this one your number. Not my real number."
Boone waved a dismissive hand.
"You wouldn't give her your private number. That number is sacred." "It's not sacred, it's... But you did give her the burner number. Why?"
JR tried to recall exactly how that happened.
"We went out on Friday, decided to get together on Saturday, and I wanted her to have it in case I was running late. Or maybe it was on Sunday. I can't recall exactly. It doesn't matter. Hold up. This is getting interesting. Boone's brown eyes snapped with curiosity. You saw this woman on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday? Don't make it out to be some big deal. When I was dating Chrissy, I often saw her every day on the weekend. You'd been dating Chrissy for months. This is someone you just met, not even as yourself. Curiosity glittered in the attorney's eyes. When you have a reveal party, can I come? What are you talking about? When you do the Clark Kent. Boone stood and, striking a dramatic pose, pretended to be pulling off his hair. When you fling off the hairpiece, tear off the beard and mustache to show her your true self. J.R. thought about his true self. The clothes and hair were surface things. He truly believed the man Britt was getting to know was who he really was deep down. There wasn't a doubt in his head that she already knew him better than all the women he'd dated put together. Maybe his lack of a sustained relationship in the past was his fault, as many of the women claimed, for being so guarded. He never knew if the woman he was dating was someone he could trust. It was funny, in a way. The entire reason he'd started seeing Britt was to decide if she was someone the family could trust. Something's buzzing in that brain of yours. His friend pinned him with a look. Based on the little I've heard so far, I'm betting it's juicy. There isn't anything to tell. We have fun together. Fun as in getting naked together fun? J.R. scowled. I'll take that as a no. His friend studied him for a long moment. Whatever he saw on J.R.'s face appeared to have him rethinking the salacious comment he'd been about to make, and instead asking blandly, Will you see her again? Relaxing, J.R. thought of the text he'd just received. Definitely. As Amos or yourself? I don't know why you persist in thinking I'm not myself when I'm Amos, J.R. snapped back. He wasn't really irritated over being forced to play 20 questions, but he didn't like being reminded he was deceiving Britt each time he saw her as Amos. Subject dropped. Boone's tone turned light. How did you two meet? For a second, J.R. was tempted to spill everything to his friend. He could trust Boone to keep whatever he told him to himself. But he didn't want his friend to get the wrong idea about Britt, to think for even 1 second that she might not be genuine. He wanted to protect Britt. The thought struck him as profound. He'd grown up around strong women, his grandmother, mother, and sisters. Nyla, the sibling closest to him in age, would skewer him with those ice-blue eyes of hers if he ever even hinted that a woman needed protecting. Britt might not need protecting, but he wanted to shield her, and yes, to protect her from unfair assumptions. Earth to J.R. Boone's gaze never wavered from J.R.'s face. I met her the weekend before last at Blue Dandelion. I went there as Amos. By yourself? To grab a Tex-Mex burger. She came in, alone. The line was long. I had the hostess ask her if she wanted to share my table. J.R. shrugged. That's how we met. The attorney's eyes narrowed. Were you ever introduced to her as J.R.? J.R. thought about the time he'd spent in Door County. No, but I did spend some time while I was in Good Hope talking with her twin. I'm getting the picture. You recognized her. She didn't recognize you. Boone took a long drink of water, then recapped the bottle. That had to be a rush. We ate, talked, and hit it off. Let me guess. She's pretty and she's blonde. How'd you know? Your women are always pretty and blonde. J.R. didn't like having Britt lumped so easily in with the other women he'd dated, but there wasn't much he could say. You called her, and then went out this weekend. Who's telling this story? You are, but I have an 11 o'clock meeting, so we need to push this along. Boone circled one hand. You called and went. I didn't call, JR clarified. I ran into her at Uncle Joe's. That country sports bar? Confusion blanketed Boone's face. What were you doing there? I was meeting some guys from the gym to watch the Rockies game. JR smiled, recalling the moment when he'd seen her sitting alone at that small table. She was there. Alone again? How'd you guess? His friend lifted his hands. Don't shoot me for saying this. I can't promise, JR warned. Don't you find it a bit strange you two just happened to run into each other on a night when you're both flying solo? What are you saying? JR narrowed his gaze. You think she planned it all? Wouldn't be the first time. Remember, what was her name? Tenley, yes. Remember her? How could I forget? Tenley Jeffers had made a bet with her friends that she could bag a billionaire. Several summers earlier, Tenley made it her mission to run into him, and she'd kept running into him. The difference is, I was never interested in Tenley. From the get-go, something about her seemed disingenuous. This new one. Boone snapped his fingers. What's her name again? I don't believe I said her name. I guess you didn't. Boone inclined his head. This new one doesn't strike you as disingenuous? She doesn't. Why don't you just tell her who you really are? Boone smiled. If she likes Amos, she's gonna go bonkers over JR. Of that, JR wasn't so certain. He'd like to come clean and explain why he lied to her. Several very real concerns had held him back. Unlike Boone, JR wasn't sure she'd be thrilled. In fact, there was an excellent chance Britt would kick him to the curb. Still, the truth had to come out for their relationship to stand a chance. He hoped if she saw he genuinely cared, she would find it in her heart to forgive the duplicity. The ding of Boone's phone pulled JR back to the present and had his friend surging to his feet. I'd say be careful, but you don't need my warning. Boone met his gaze. We both know it's a jungle out there. JR smiled as Britt stared open-mouthed at the picnic basket, filled with everything from grilled chicken sandwiches on focaccia with smoked mozzarella and avocado to ginger molasses cookies. There was even a bottle of wine nestled inside the wicker. When she'd texted him earlier this afternoon to see if he had plans for dinner, JR had suggested a picnic at Civic Center Park after she got off work. As it was a Wednesday, the park wasn't crowded. A large oak provided the perfect spot to spread their blanket under leafy branches. After they ate and she caught him up on what was happening in her world, he would tell her the truth about his identity. Did you put this together yourself? She asked, clearly impressed. His cook had made up the basket, so JR carefully considered his answer. There are several places in the city that will put them together for you. If it was left up to me, we'd be having peanut butter sandwiches and an apple. I love PB&J. Britt's lovely smile lit up her beautiful face. And apples. Her ability to find pleasure in the everyday was only one of the things he liked about her. Uncorking the wine, he poured them each a glass. How's your week going so far? Taking a sip, she studied him over the rim. I'll tell you about mine if you promise to tell me about yours. We always talk about me. I like hearing what's going on in your life. A relationship is a two-way street. The look in her eyes told him she wouldn't budge on this point. I learn about you, you learn about me. He tipped his glass in agreement. You first. My week has been fabulous. I really enjoy working with Hal. Britt took a bite of sandwich, then closed her eyes and savored. Wow, this is good. The basil mayonnaise really adds a nice sweet flavor. The comment spurred JR to set down his glass and take a bite of his own sandwich. He chewed. You're right. JR smiled as Britt took another bite. He waited until she swallowed to ask another question. As he wasn't quite ready to share, he needed to keep her talking. What do you like most about working with Hal? Britt's gaze turned thoughtful as she chewed. I feel like I can talk to her about anything, and she'll be honest with me. Like you. That last part had JR inwardly wincing, but he concentrated on the positive. He liked that Britt and his grandmother had a close relationship. Family was important to him. If Britt ever became a permanent part of his life... He stopped himself. Permanent part? Britt didn't even know his real name. She hadn't been given a chance to be part of his world. Though he had to admit he could see her easily fitting into that world. Refocusing on the matter at hand, he inclined his head. What's going to happen to your work with Hal once you get the Grizzlies job? I love your confidence, and I'll bag this bear. On that note, Britt made a sound like a drum roll. I now have a new interview date and time, Friday at 10. That's fabulous news. JR grasped her hands and gave them a quick squeeze. When did you hear? The call came this morning. That's why I texted. I wanted to celebrate with you. She lifted the glass of wine and urged him to do the same, then clinked her glass against his. Here's to a successful first interview that will eventually lead to a job offer. He gulped the wine, finding her excitement contagious. Britt expelled a happy breath. Stephanie called me herself. Nyla Driscoll is back from Paris, so it's all systems go. You're going to absolutely wow them. The sparkle in Britt's eyes flashed, then dimmed. I wish my parents believed in me half as much as you do. Though her tone remained light, JR had gotten to know her well during their time together. Whatever arrows her parents had shot had hit the mark. What did they say? She waved a dismissive hand, but he saw the hurt in her eyes. JR reached over, laced his fingers with hers. Tell me what they said to you. They stressed? Britt paused and cleared her throat. The importance of not blowing the interview by being overconfident. Told me that's my weakness. Oh, and to think through my answers, since I can be kind of flighty. Our conversation ended with my dad reminding me I've lost out on other jobs before, and I'll survive losing out on this one. They don't know you. JR fought to keep anger out of his voice. He wouldn't diss her parents, though he couldn't imagine why they'd chosen to take potshots at her confidence, especially a few days before a crucial interview. That's the only thing that makes sense. She gazed down at her hands for a second before lifting her eyes. I don't believe they see me as I am now. Maybe I was that way at 16, but that was a long time ago. I'm not flighty or impulsive, unless you count putting J.R. Driscoll down as a reference without having met him. That wasn't impulsive. That was a calculated risk. That's exactly what Hal called it. And you're both right. I did think it through. She blew out a breath. I still can't believe I still haven't gotten the chance to meet him. You have no idea how small Good Hope is. Everyone knows everybody, whether you want to or not. My twin hung out with him on a swing set, for crying out loud. JR chuckled and offered an encouraging smile. What's your plan of attack for the interview? Britt broke off a piece of cookie and popped it into her mouth. As she chewed, the lost look left her eyes. I'm going in confident. I have a few questions prepared and some examples of work I did that got results at my last job. I also have some new ideas that I haven't seen on any of the Grizzlies' social media so far. My goal is to show them I'm committed, creative, and can get the job done. Excellent plan. JR brought one of her hands to his lips and kissed her knuckles. When will they let you know the job is yours? She offered him a warm smile. I like how you think. Not if the job is mine, but when. I needed this confidence boost. So, thank you. You're welcome. Her expression darkened. There'll likely be more than one interview, and there's still the issue of JR being down as one of my references. That could torpedo everything. For all I know, his sister has already asked him about me. If that were true, and if he said he didn't know you, they wouldn't have scheduled the interview.
Good point. Her brows furrowed. The man still isn't returning my calls. JR knew the worry about listing him as a reference gnawed at her. The last thing he wanted was for her to go into the interview on Friday unnecessarily stressed. He should tell her right now who he was and that he was on her side. Then again, if hearing the truth only upset her more, that could throw her off her game too. She'd clearly put a lot of effort into prepping for the interview. She deserved to go in and shoot her shot without anything distracting her. Hello, Earth to Amos. Are you still listening? She playfully tapped his forehead. You look like you've got a lot going on in there.
JR will be at Silver Creek on Friday. I'll make sure the two of you connect.
She smiled and cocked her head. How do you know he'll be there? JR took a bite of sandwich to buy himself some time.
I overheard him scheduling a meeting with Derek the other day.
You were working at Silver Creek? I wish I had known. It's funny we never run into each other. Nodding, JR bit into his sandwich. All he wanted was to reassure Britt, but this conversation was turning into a minefield. He chewed, swallowed.
You're busy with Hal.
He kept his tone conversational.
I'm on floors still under construction. Wouldn't be safe to have people wandering around there.
Britt nodded. I suppose that's true. Listen, I don't want you to go out of your way to try and introduce me to JR. You're sweet to want to help, but I don't want to get you in trouble with your boss or anything. I made this mess, and I'll clean it up.
I promise I can connect you with JR. It's not a problem.
Hope lit her eyes. Oh, Amos, thank you. She didn't press for how he could make it happen. Britt simply trusted. In him. His heart lurched. He couldn't lose her now. Not when they'd started to build something special. Not when they'd started to mean something to each other.
Things will work out.
JR curled his fingers around hers.
Text me once the interview is over and you're back at Silver Creek. I'll make the arrangements.
That's when he would tell her that he was JR. He'd assure her she had nothing to fear. When they called to check her references, he'd sing her praises. You're the best. Britt flung her arms around his neck. I've got a feeling this Friday is going to be a day to remember. Chapter 10. Britt hummed as she helped Hal with her rooftop garden. She'd never been one who enjoyed getting her hands dirty, but over the past 2 weeks, she'd discovered something about herself. Feeling the warm, dark earth between her fingers, seeing the shoots of green spear up from the planters, both calmed and centered her. It's like I'm getting in touch with my inner self. Gardening can do that for you. Hal's response had Britt flushing. She hadn't realized she'd spoken aloud. It's so peaceful out here. Britt chuckled. It's hard to believe we're in the middle of a city of nearly 1 million people. I wanted that peace. Hal's lips curved. And I got it. I'm glad you invited me to garden with you. Britt brushed a strand of hair from her face with the back of her hand, her fingers bumping the wide-brimmed straw hat. She'd balked at wearing the hat until Hal reminded her that the altitude increased her risk of sunburn. The last thing Britt wanted was to show up to her interview tomorrow looking like a boiled lobster. You seemed a bit tense when you showed up this morning. Hal motioned her over to the shaded table holding tall glasses of iced tea. Is something troubling you? Nothing other than my interview is tomorrow, and I still haven't reached JR. Giving a little laugh, Britt put down the trowel and thought about Amos's promise. While she believed Amos would do everything in his power to keep that promise, she knew from experience that JR was a difficult man to pin down. Heck, JR could get called out of town and not even show up at Silver Creek tomorrow. I think I'm going to have to tell the truth. Hal pointed to a chair and pushed a glass of tea toward Britt. What truth is that?
Britt rubbed the cool glass against her forehead to ward off the headache trying to form.
That I don't know, JR.
In this situation, I see the truth somewhat differently. You're from Good Hope, and you were there at the same time as my grandson. Hal's gaze remained fixed on Britt as she lowered her glass.
You're both acquainted with Kyle Kendrick.
But if Human Resources calls JR and
don't go looking for trouble.
Hal's voice turned soft. Perhaps by the time they get around to calling, you'll have reached him. Britt considered Hal's words.
Focus your energies on the interview,
Hal continued, reaching over to give Britt's hand a squeeze.
Don't be distracted by what might happen in the future.
This is your opportunity to wow them.
I'm only sorry I'm not the one listed as a reference for you. I'd give you a glowing recommendation and vouch for you on both a personal and professional level.
Thank you, Hal. Working for you is such a pleasure.
It doesn't even feel like a job.
I'm happy it's been enjoyable, but you've more than earned your salary. Your social media outreach on behalf of Silver Creek is drawing in scores of prospective tenants. Britt cocked her head, intrigued.
How do you know it's due to my efforts?
The leasing company has questions they ask when someone contacts them about a tour. Satisfaction blanketed Hal's face.
Quite a few have mentioned your Instagram feed and YouTube videos, along with the dance you got the front desk security guards to do on TikTok. That's one I have yet to see.
Britt laughed.
I thought it was a fun way to show the lobby and common area without looking like I was trying to show it off.
Hal lifted a staying hand when Britt reached for her phone. Show me later. Right now, let's talk about how you plan to celebrate once you get your dream job with the Grizzlies. Britt hesitated, wondering what Hal would say if she told her she planned to make love with Amos. It was time. Britt was ready to take their relationship to the next level. Obviously misinterpreting her silence, Hal clucked her tongue.
You must do something special. If you're envisioning me sitting home alone, no fears.
Britt smiled. Knowing Amos, his own plans for the evening would be super special.
The guy I've been seeing, Amos? Well, he told me when I get the job, we're going to celebrate. I'm not sure what it will be, but knowing him, it'll be amazing.
Hal slowly lowered her glass.
Amos? Amos Lee. It's a different kind of name, isn't it? One you don't hear often.
Britt expelled a happy breath.
He's sweet and loving and absolutely amazing.
Hal studied her face.
You like him?
I do, Britt admitted. He's a nice, down-to-earth guy, not a rich, privileged playboy like my ex-boyfriend. I really, really like him. Sounds like a wonderful man. I'm surprised I haven't heard more about him.
You know how it is when something is new. Either you want to shout it from the rooftops or hold it close to your heart.
Britt sighed. Because of my past, I was skeptical and not very trusting. I have to say, Amos won me over. The guy is as genuine as they come.
I can't wait for you to meet him.
Hal's eyes held a determined gleam.
I look forward to it.
As soon as Britt stepped into the lobby of the luxurious downtown Denver office building Friday morning, she called on her inner calm. It would do no good to walk into an important interview stressed. She took a second to focus on the simple elegance of the building's architecture, then on the way her heels sounded, striking the marble floor. Striding to the circular guard station in the center of the lobby, she flashed her sunniest smile to the two men behind the desk.
Good morning. I'm Brittany Appleton, here to see Stephanie Bigler.
We need to see your identification. The man, balding and in his late 50s, barely glanced up.
Sign the register, please.
The other, a younger guy with a mop of brown hair, smiled back. Britt pulled out the slim ID case that contained her driver's license and one maxed-out credit card. She handed the license to the older man.
Pennsylvania,
the younger one commented, peering over his coworker's shoulder.
You're far from home. She settled for another smile, lifting one shoulder in a slight shrug. "You're on Ms. Bigler's schedule, and everything checks out." The older man handed back her license and gestured toward a bank of gleaming elevators. "Take the third one on your right to the 20th floor." "Thank you." Nerves fluttered in her chest like 1,000 butterfly wings. "Focus on the goal," Britt told herself as the elevator stopped at the 20th floor and the door slid silently open. The goal was to secure a position with the Grizzlies. To meet that goal, she needed to convince both Stephanie and Nyla Driscoll that she was perfect for the job. 30 minutes later, Britt felt confident that a celebration with Amos tonight was in the bag. She wouldn't need JR's influence, or, more specifically, his reference, to secure this position as a social media specialist. Her ability to sell her talent and ingenuity were enough. Though Stephanie hadn't given her the nod, not yet, Britt could tell she'd impressed the woman who headed the PR team. The only worrisome part was that Nyla Driscoll had yet to make an appearance. Britt couldn't believe that after Nyla delayed the interview process for 2 weeks because of her extended trip, the president of operations hadn't bothered to stop by, even briefly. Then again, Britt had thought it strange from the beginning that someone at Nyla's level wanted to be involved in the interview process at this stage. "You have exactly the experience and energy we're looking for." At the start of the interview, Stephanie had motioned Britt away from her sleek desk and to the chairs grouped for conversation near large windows overlooking downtown Denver. "Your work with the Philadelphia Silverhawks showed creativity while keeping a firm focus on their brand. I believe you'd be an asset to our organization." "Here it comes." Britt forced herself not to lean forward in her chair. In her mind, overeagerness ranked right up there with desperation as a most unattractive quality. "I'm impressed by you and everything I heard today." "Thank you." Britt met Stephanie's gaze. "I'm excited about the work being done by your department, and I'm a huge Grizzlies fan." "That helps." Stephanie flashed a smile. "I'd like to—" This time, Britt couldn't stop herself. Leaning forward ever so slightly, she held her breath and tried to will Stephanie to say the words. Even as the PR director opened her mouth, the phone she'd placed on the glass-topped table buzzed. The stylish 30-something blonde glanced at the screen. "Excuse me a second." "Of course." Though her heart began an erratic rhythm, Britt projected a serenity she didn't feel. "Nyla, good morning. No, you're not interrupting." Could Nyla be calling to see if the time was right to stop down and give her blessing? Britt resisted the childish urge to cross her fingers. "Yes." Stephanie smiled. "I'll be there in 15. Britt refused to let her disappointment show as Stephanie clicked off the call. "I apologize for the interruption." Stephanie paused and tapped a finger against her lips. "Where was I?" "You were about to tell me I made it to round 2. "We were discussing how my past experience makes me an excellent fit for this position." "Ah, yes." Stephanie sat back. Alarm bells rang loudly in Britt's head. Things had suddenly gone off script. This was the point where Stephanie should be telling her to expect to hear from her very, very soon. If the stars aligned, Stephanie would make an offer after the second interview and ask when she could start. Britt would accept immediately and then eagerly march down to Human Resources, where they'd have her fill out internship. Darn, darn, darn! Britt knew better than to let her mind wander, even for a second. Flighty was the word her father used. Typical blonde was her mother's go-to comment. In their book, her twin was the clear thinker, the smart one. Feeling much like a Grizzlies quarterback tossing a Hail Mary, Britt managed a contemplative nod. "Internship?" "Yes, we'd pay you a stipend for the 30 days. It's a nominal amount, but should help offset some of your living expenses." Stephanie named a dollar amount that would barely cover ramen noodles for a month, much less rent. "I've interviewed a number of extremely qualified candidates, but you, Britt, rose to the top." Britt smiled. "That's good to hear.
Why the internship, you may ask? Stephanie laced her fingers together and sat back in the chair. Why don't we simply offer you the position now? Unsure of the appropriate response, Britt settled for another smile. We were recently disappointed by someone who interviewed well, but who couldn't deliver on her promises. This is a way to make sure we're a good fit for you, and you're a good fit for us. They both knew Stephanie was in the driver's seat. Britt had battled the tight job market ever since the Silverhawks had trimmed their social media staff. Last one hired, first one to go. That, despite the fact that Britt had worked her tail off and had done a stellar job. I believe, personality-wise, you would fit in here quite well, Stephanie continued, two lines forming between her brows. The unknown is what creative ideas would you bring to the table to promote not only the team and its players, but the Grizzlies' organization. Britt wondered if Stephanie had listened to a single word she'd uttered during the past hour. I'm sorry for your unfortunate hiring experience, but I guarantee you wouldn't regret hiring me. Sell yourself, Britt told herself. Not only do I play well with others, Britt paused to offer a smile, no need to sound arrogant. I'm a master at a wide variety of social media. We've discussed some of the creative ideas I have for... Stephanie held up a hand with perfectly manicured nails. Britt immediately stopped. A sick feeling took up residence in the pit of her stomach. You don't need to keep selling yourself. Stephanie's eyes held understanding. I'm already impressed and interested. I wouldn't have offered the internship otherwise. Shoving down the desire to speak, Britt clamped her lips together. Nyla and I would like to see that creativity in action and assess the results before we offer the position. Britt hadn't planned on a low-paying internship, but if that's what it took to get her foot in the door, she'd be foolish to refuse. How will I be evaluated? Excellent question. With an approving nod, Stephanie reached into the briefcase she'd positioned beside her chair at the beginning of the interview. Pulling out a sheet of paper, she handed it to Britt. Britt let her gaze skim the information, then looked up. This is a list of KPIs. Exactly right. Stephanie leaned back. These key performance indicators are what we'll use to evaluate you. As you can see, the focus is primarily on reach and engagement. Shooting another quick glance at the list, Britt decided the expectations were straightforward. Stephanie's gaze searched hers. This next month will be your time to shine, to show us just how creative you can be. All I ask is that you run ideas past me to make sure we're not already doing something similar, and so we can properly assess the results. At the end of 30 days, your performance will be reviewed and a decision made regarding permanent employment. Britt's mind whirled. She'd expected a second interview, maybe even a third. She hadn't foreseen this. We will, of course, check your references before the internship begins. Stephanie smiled. For now, I just need to know if you're interested. Chapter 11. JR had a busy schedule on Friday, but a text from his grandmother had him canceling the rest of his morning meetings. Whatever she needed to discuss with him sounded serious. His first thought was it had to do with his grandfather, but her rather curt response in the negative had him breathing easier. The door to his office opened barely 30 minutes later. JR sprang to his feet when his grandmother strode into the room, looking every inch the formidable matriarch of the Driscoll clan. No baggy trousers or paint shirt today, and not a gardening glove or straw hat in sight. The emerald green dress flattered her trim, compact frame. The pearls around her neck had been her mother's. She'd pulled her hair back into a classic chignon. The eyes that lit upon him, normally so warm and filled with merriment, were decidedly cool. He could recall only one time when she'd gazed at him with such disapproval. That had been years ago. Gran? He crossed the room, but when he gave her a hug, her shoulders remained stiff. We need to talk. She gestured to the seating area, then took the chair that was his favorite. JR sat opposite her, feeling very much like a child called into the headmaster's office. What brings you here this morning?
Well, Amos,
She began. A sick feeling filled the pit of his stomach. Even before she continued, he knew what she was going to say.
it appears you've been busy doing exactly what I told you not to do.
He heard the displeasure in her voice and saw the disapproval in her eyes. But before this went any further, he had to know one thing.
Does Britt know who I am? Not yet.
His grandmother's lips pursed.
But she soon will, because you're going to tell her.
JR lifted his hands, palms out.
It's not what you think. What is it I'm thinking?
Hal continued, without giving him a chance to respond.
Am I thinking that you deliberately disobeyed my directive not to get in Britt's way? That you decided to check her out, despite my assurance to you that such an action wasn't necessary? After June, I wanted to be. I told you that one bad apple would not make me lose faith.
Hal's tone held a steely edge.
I don't need my grandson or any other man in my life treating me like I'm too foolish to make my own decisions. I've never liked your alter ego, but I tolerated it because I know life gets stressful for you. But if I thought for 1 second that you'd use it to take advantage of women, you're not the man I thought you were. Gran.
JR lifted a hand.
I would never take advantage of Britt or any other woman. Not as Amos or myself. Have you even thought of all the ramifications of getting involved with a potential employee if you're just looking for a fling?
His grandmother's sharp gaze never wavered.
I've gotten to know Britt very well over the past couple of weeks, and I don't want her hurt, personally or professionally. I like her very much. I like her too.
JR spoke quickly. He needed his grandmother to know he hadn't deliberately sought Britt out.
I ran into her at Uncle Joe's one night, and yes, I seized the opportunity, only because I wanted to protect you.
Hal huffed out a breath, and JR swore he could see steam coming out.
That was wrong. I see that now.
He held up both hands.
I fully admit my motives were less than pure at the beginning. I was determined to find out if she had a hidden agenda. Then...
He paused, remembering how simply being with her made him happy. She was the only woman who'd made him think of forever.
Then?
Hal snapped.
I'm not looking for a fling, Gran.
JR spread his hands wide and offered a rueful smile.
I've fallen for her.
A look of startled surprise crossed his grandmother's face. JR shook his head and chuckled.
I don't know how it happened. You love her?
There was wonderment in Hal's voice.
Maybe. Yes. I don't know.
JR's smile faded, and he raked a hand through his hair.
I do know that I don't want to hurt her or ruin what we're building, but I realize you can't forge a strong relationship on a shaky foundation.
JR interrupted, needing his grandmother to understand.
The plan is to come clean about everything tonight. You need to be prepared. Britt will be angry,
Hal warned.
What woman wouldn't be? Finding out the man she's falling in love with has been lying to her since they met will go down hard.
JR leaned forward.
She told you she loved me? You lied to her,
was his grandmother's only response.
I didn't lie about everything,
JR stressed.
Just my name and occupation. Other than that, I played it straight. That makes this mess somewhat better, but doesn't excuse your behavior.
Hal's gaze met his.
You keep to your plan and tell that wonderful girl the truth. Yes, ma'am.
Knowing it was the right thing to do didn't stop the fear. What if Britt told him she never wanted to see him again? What if she banished him from her life? His grandmother rose. JR stood and walked with her to the door. When he reached around her to open it, she placed a staying hand on his arm.
Whenever you find yourself tempted to take the easy road out of the difficult, remember, you're a Driscoll. When we make a mistake, we own up to it. We take our lumps,
Then we do everything possible to make it up to the person we wronged. I'm sorry, Gran. My actions were disrespectful to you and to Britt. Yes, they were. I've been wanting to tell her for a while, but I didn't want to throw her off balance before the interview. Hal raised an eyebrow. Was that it? Or did you not want her angry with you? Not want to risk her saying she never wants to see you again? She continued without giving JR a chance to reply. Whatever your motivation was, there is no reason to delay any longer. Britt deserves the truth. JR met her bright blue eyes. What if she won't let me make it up to her? Then you will be the respectful man you were raised to be and honor her boundaries. Hal's gaze remained steady and solemn as she placed a loving hand on her grandson's face. Be the good man you are, and you'll find a way. The second Britt stepped onto the sidewalk outside the building housing Grizzly's operations, she found a quiet spot and called Amos. She heard voices in the background, both male and female. It sounded as if she'd interrupted some sort of meeting. Is this a bad time? Britt kept her tone light, reminding herself he had job responsibilities too. She couldn't expect him to always be available. This is actually a good time. I've been wondering how your interview went. The voices in the background hushed, and Britt heard a door shut. Tell me all about it. It ended up being completely different from what I thought. Because it was Amos, Britt didn't try to hold back the sigh. She wasn't impressed? Amos spoke cautiously, as if feeling his way along. She was, but she didn't offer me the position. Britt swallowed against the sudden thickness in her throat. She asked me to participate in an internship. After a month, she'll decide whether to extend an offer. Amos listened without comment as Britt explained how it would work and how her performance would be reviewed. You'll be so innovative, they won't know what hit 'em. Amos's voice rang with confidence. By the end of the 30 days, that job will be yours. I'm glad I called you. Britt found the tightness in her chest easing. Talking with you always makes me feel better. JR cleared his throat. What did you think of Nyla? Oh, Nyla. Britt chuckled. I waited 2 weeks for this interview so she could be there, and she didn't even show. Frankly, I was glad she didn't. She might have asked how I met her brother. That would have been awkward. You'd have made it work. I love your confidence in me. Britt wished he was with her now. She blew out a breath. Stephanie mentioned they'll be checking my references. Yes, they will check. When JR says who, when they mention my name, I won't have to worry about how I'm going to survive on the internship stipend, because my application will be tossed. That won't happen, because you're meeting with JR today. You got it set up? Britt's voice pitched high. I promised I'd bring the two of you together. I know you did, but some things can be outside of your control. Nervous excitement sluiced through her veins. While she wasn't certain how JR would respond, she knew her twin thought he was a great guy, and Hal seemed to think her grandson would be understanding. What time? What do you mean? Where am I supposed to meet JR? And what time should I be there? 2 o'clock. Your apartment. Amos hesitated. Does that work for you? I'll make it work. Having JR come to her apartment seemed a bit strange, but Britt figured it would guarantee privacy that they might not find elsewhere. When will you be over? Britt's heart flip-flopped when he didn't immediately respond. Unless you're busy. I'm never too busy for you. His deep voice was a husky rumble. I know we were just together on Wednesday, but that feels like a lifetime ago. Britt tightened her fingers around the phone. It feels that way to me, too. He cleared his throat. I'd like to take you out to dinner tonight. Somewhere nice. You don't have to do that. I'd be just as happy eating in. Britt decided to take the leap. After all, why should it always be the guy making the first move? You could come up to my place. We could order a pizza, then play a game or two of chess. If you wanted, you could spend the night." When the silence lengthened, she added, "Or not." "I'd like that very much. But let's wait to see how you feel after your talk with JR. Britt's heart swelled. Amos was obviously worried that if her talk with JR didn't go well, she'd be too upset to spend time with him. He obviously didn't realize that if things went badly, she'd need him even more. "I don't know how long this meeting with JR will take, though I don't imagine it will take much time." Britt kept her voice light. "Regardless of how it goes, Amos, I want you with me tonight. All night." Chapter 12. Britt glanced at her watch. It was showtime, and she was ready to get this party started. She'd kept on the dress she wore for the interview. The blue lace shift was a personal favorite, so why mess with perfection? Since she hadn't eaten, she made a protein shake. No need having her stomach growl during her conversation with JR. Lastly, she freshened her makeup and fluffed her hair. Looking her best gave her confidence. Right now, she needed it. Britt told herself to keep what she'd done in perspective. It wasn't as if she'd claimed to have once worked for JR or asserted they were best buddies. She'd merely put the guy down as a personal reference. Was it really too much to ask that he simply say he knew her casually? If he could add that she appeared to be a nice person and a real go-getter, she'd be forever grateful. The sharp rap at the door had her surging to her feet. Slipping on her heels, Britt crossed the short distance to glance through the peep. Her heart somersaulted at the sight of JR. Thanks to Amos, this was really happening. The knock sounded again, louder and more forceful. Straightening her shoulders, Britt pasted on a smile and opened the door. Dressed in a hand-tailored charcoal suit, JR was even more impressive than when she'd spotted him in Good Hope. His expertly cut dark hair framed a handsome face with a strong jaw and piercing blue eyes. His lean, athletic body would make a nun sit up and take notice. With his money, looks, and the power he wielded, Britt could understand how he'd been voted Denver's most eligible bachelor. "Hi." His gaze searched her face. "Mr. Driscoll?" Britt kept her voice light and stepped to the side to let him enter. I think we've moved beyond such formalities." He moved into the small space, which seemed to suddenly shrink. His voice was oddly familiar, but her brain was having trouble making the connection. Until his scent reached her nostrils. "Tom Ford, that's the same—" Her breath caught in her throat. "Amos?" The name came out on a whoosh of air. "I need to explain." Concern filled his eyes. Amos's eyes. "You're JR?" she sputtered. He nodded, his expression grave. Tears stung the backs of her lids, then slipped down her cheeks. Britt angrily swiped at them with the back of her hand. She wanted to strike out, to throw something, to drop to the sofa and sob. Instead, she whirled and stalked to the end of the room, where she rested both palms on the dinette table, her breath coming fast as she fought for control. Amos. Her friend. Her confidant. Her rock. Britt felt his presence behind her and whirled. Familiar blue eyes in an unfamiliar face stared back at her. "Why did you lie to me? Did you want to get back at me for using your name? Or is this just what you do for fun? Dress up in disguise so you can mess with people?" The words came fast and laced with sarcasm. "Let me guess, it's a different disguise for every woman, right?" "Of course not. I'd never do that. You know me better than that." His soft, conciliatory tone was like kerosene on a fire. "I don't know you at all. To think all this time I worried you would consider me dishonest for saying I knew you?" Her laugh held an edge. "You've been lying to me for weeks, and I never once suspected." "Please, Britt, let me explain."
What explanation can you possibly have for pretending to be my friend? For making me think you liked me, cared about me? For making me believe we had a connection? She expelled a shuddering breath, and in that moment, pain overwhelmed the fury. Fresh tears stung the backs of her eyes. You made me believe you cared, that I was special to you.
You are special, and I do care. I care very much.
JR stepped close, too close. Even as she put her palms against his shirt front and pushed him back, her heart broke a little more. I thought we were building something special. Now it appears it was all just some sick game.
It was never a game.
JR's gaze remained steady on hers. Then what was it, Amos? Oh, I mean, JR.
Running into you that night at the Blue Dandelion was pure coincidence.
He spoke fast, as if wanting to get it all out before she stopped him.
I thought you recognized me, too. That's why I had the hostess ask if you wanted to share my table.
She folded her arms across her chest, holding her pain close. He lifted one hand, as if to touch her, then let it drop when she gave her head a fierce shake.
When I realized you hadn't seen past the disguise, I decided to just let the night play out because I was enjoying being with you. The second time I saw you was unplanned, too, but then I seized the opportunity to see how you really felt about my grandmother. We're all very protective of her.
That doesn't make sense. Britt frowned. Hal is a smart, strong woman, very capable of looking out for herself.
There was an incident last year.
He shifted from one foot to the other.
Someone pretended to be her friend and took advantage.
That's horrible.
It was a difficult situation,
JR admitted. Okay, you wanted to protect your grandmother. That I get. Why the disguise?
I sometimes go out as Amos, but not to trick people or pick up women. It's because that's the only way I can go out without being hassled by people.
JR shrugged.
It had been a hectic day. I wanted to eat without being disturbed.
Britt cocked her head. You really wear a disguise just to go out to dinner?
Remember what you said about Good Hope? How everyone knows everything about each other? Well, for O'Driscoll and Denver, it's the same. Only some of the people who want to know you don't plan to be your friends. They want something from you.
JR blew out a breath.
No one wants anything from Amos. No one pays him any mind.
I did.
Yes.
He spoke quietly, his voice thick.
You saw the man beneath the long hair and scruffy beard.
That man was the one she'd fallen in love with, while this man in front of her seemed like a stranger. You had plenty of opportunities to tell me your true identity.
You're absolutely right. I should have told you long before now. There is no excuse other than I couldn't stand the thought of losing you.
His blue eyes begged her to understand. The explanation held a crazy kind of logic. He stepped closer, so close Britt could feel the heat from his body and smell the intoxicating scent of his cologne. It was all so familiar. Even though he didn't look the same, the voice, the scent, the eyes were all Amos. Her Amos. He opened his arms, his gaze searching her face.
Can I hold you?
The bald hope in his eyes tugged at her heart. Britt shook her head. This is all so complicated. Amos was my rock. He centered me. He made me feel safe and loved. Britt heard her voice wobble, but was powerless to control the shaking. I wanted to be with Amos. She thrust her hand into her hair. I don't even know if I can be with JR. Not if I want to work for the Grizzlies.
We'll work it out.
Work it out? Like, I'll get the job because I'm involved with you? I'm not okay with that.
You'll get the job because you're good at what you do.
Like anyone else will know that. Once they find out we're...
Well, you did already put on your application that you know me.
This isn't funny, Amos. JR.
I know it's not. Just trust me. Please, we can make this work.
I don't know if I can trust you.
She slanted a glance at him.
I don't know who you are as J.R. Driscoll.
Yes, you do, Britt. J.R. cleared his throat. You know I love junior mints, Art Deco, and playing chess. You know I'm not particularly fond of Ferris wheels, unless I'm stuck at the top with you. The memory coaxed a brief smile out of her. You know me, regardless of what my name is. His tone turned pleading. I know it's not simple, and there's a lot to work out still. But give us a chance. She gave a half laugh, half sob, and moved into him, wrapping herself around him. Strong arms closed around her, and her world, which had been knocked off its axis, righted. The feel of him was so familiar and so dear. As she burrowed in, pressing her body tightly against his, she heard him expel a ragged breath. I don't know what to say, she whispered against his shirt front. Dropping his forehead to rest against the top of her head, J.R. whispered back, Just say yes. This has been Just Say Yes, written by Cindy Kirk, performed by Amy McFadden. Copyright 2020 by Cynthia R. Rutledge. Production copyright 2020 by Cynthia R. Rutledge. Thank you for listening.